I know Taylor can't. He's working tonight.
I'm going to go and put us live on the cable channel.
Okay. I can actually see Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Yes.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Pixley.
Hi.
Hey, Steve, it's Jenna.
Hi, Jenna.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How's everyone else doing?
Oh, all right.
I got the steamboat landing floats in today.
You did.
Yeah, with the help of the highway, but yeah, all of them are in.
Is the whaler,
Wow.
Steve, is the whaler in the water yet?
No, that's getting a new steering column put in by D&M Marine. I'm hoping it'll be done in a couple days because I want to have it for when we put the finger floats in next week.
Yeah.
So everything's going good. I still got some work to do on that wharf that had some problems with that last storm.
Yeah, I saw it, Steve.
But hey, that's part of the fun, right? Living in the coastal town.
When you live by the water, you can get your feet wet. What the hell is that?
If I'm counting right, I think we have 13.
Steve, are you doing the dishes?
I'm actually cooking steak on my wood stove.
All right, well, just maybe you want to mute yourself while you're doing it.
Okay, I think we have 13. Audra, do you want to start and I can do the, make sure we have enough people and have a quorum here. I'll do a roll call. It's I have 6:32, so we'll see who else shows up in the process. Is John French here?
God.
I don't see John. Lisa Dresser.
Yes.
Jim Hurd is not coming this evening. Judy Scheibel.
Shelby, yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know where you've got that. I've been saying it wrong all along.
That's okay.
Richard Householder? No. Drew Lyman? No. Lorna Cummings?
I'm here.
I'm here. Mark Haskell, I saw you here.
I
Mark
think I'm here.
You are. Mark Siegenthaler is here.
Here.
Sandy Cox, I saw.
Here.
Mark Corsi? No, Mark Corsi. Carla Doremus Tranfield?
Here.
I think I heard, yeah. Shannon Herring? No. Kristen Sidwell?
Here.
I believe I saw. Mary Winchell?
Here.
Wendy Rich?
Here.
Sophie Romano?
I'm here.
Courtney Sukeforth? No. Beth Doan?
Yes,
Here.
Courtney's there.
Sorry.
Oh, Courtney is here. Okay, sorry. Beth Doan. Tyler Smith, I think I heard not coming. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And we need 13 for a quorum. So we do have a quorum. So we're all set. And if somebody notices somebody else coming in late, if you can let us know, we'll mark that down as well. Thank you, everybody, for coming for our final meeting of the Budget Committee and an additional meeting that we didn't have. As you saw from the agenda that was sent out tonight, we have 3 things left to look at tonight: capital reserves, capital improvements, and revenues, which Janice set out again, and Audra has some updates from what we had originally in our Budget Committee books. But I just wanted to note, hopefully everybody got, like, because you're here, I assume you got my email earlier last week talking about this meeting, kind of talking about how we were going in process here. It's been obviously unusual. We started out pre-pandemic, pre-stay-at-home orders and physically distancing and all of that, and with a very different set of assumptions, or a very specific set of assumptions, which didn't take into account possibilities of what's going on with revenue, what's going on with the economy and the community. But where we had really gotten through the lion's share of this before things changed, we talked about going forward with those same assumptions so that we were maintaining a stable platform for this, so that if cuts have to come as we go forward, they could be done across the board and not have different sets of assumptions coming in at different points in the process for this budget. It makes it awkward for us, I think, knowing that there are a lot of potential changes coming down the road and that it's a different world than when we started. One of the things that we talked about and that I mentioned is that there's a possibility of forwarding this budget to the select board as we go with a motion, which I suggested a motion, which is up for as much editing as you want, but it was just a place to start, to pass a budget along, saying that we acknowledge that things have changed, that we're passing this budget along, that it was started with very different circumstances than we're ending with, and that we obviously have to take into consideration that the select board is the next stop for this budget for them to be working on theirs and Audra, and that there's a lot of unknowns. And as we go forward, there may well have to be some pretty serious changes to this budget going forward that they will have to make if there are suddenly different projections for revenues coming in. There's just so many unknowns we don't know. A couple of things that have happened in the meantime, since our last meeting, there's been a much stronger review, or a strong review of our town charter. And our town charter states that we must have this budget completed this week to hand over to the select board. So this is, in fact, our last opportunity to have any conversation over the budget this evening. I did ask if you sent me, and I did not get any. I don't know if anybody sent any in to you, any suggestions that you might have had for making adjustments going forward to forward on to the select board. There were conversations last week about a lot of different things that we could potentially, areas that could be cut. And Audra has some suggestions for some of what we're going to be looking at this evening, and she'll talk about that. Another thing which was pointed out was, a budget is a tool. And as we pass this budget on and it goes to the select board, and then it gets voted on somehow through the town, however that process is as it goes forward, whether we are able to have our town meeting on schedule or what happens from there. But if we are to take things out of the budget at this point, they would not be able to be put back in once it was passed and going forward. If we're passing along a full budget, if there was, say, a fire engine that we deemed, let's get rid of the fire engine now, and then things ended up being okay financially later, and we had taken it out, it would not be able to be put back in after town budget. Whereas if we left it in and things come in short for revenue, and then Audra and the select board would be able to make that decision to say, we're going to take that out. So a lot of this, I think, has to do with trust on our part and how we feel with the select board and the town staff and how they've developed this budget, and trusting that they will be responsible. And I'm not to suggest that they wouldn't, but going forward as things change and things become known, there are just so many unknowns out there right now. I've been on so many Zoom phone calls or meetings over the last couple of weeks with different groups of organizations, and nobody knows what they're doing. It's really difficult moving forward. So I think that was it. I have the motion here. I sent it to you. I don't know if I can share later when we get to that point, Audra, if people want to do any edits. I have it up on my computer and can share it later if we want to. But I don't know if you want to go forward with what we have, Audra, and then if anybody has suggestions of things for the select board to look at for potential cuts as we go down the line, or if you want to start, where do you think it makes most sense to start?
Sorry, I'm just trying to bring up my agenda. So I guess, the first thing, one of the first things that we talked about or talked about during one of the first meetings was capital reserves. And, that is an area where, we do have some opportunity to, make some cuts and have some savings there. It really, some of these accounts, they are kind of running a little bit low, but they're sort of more for emergency purposes anyway, and we don't have a project planned or we don't have anything urgent happening. We can always sort of look at this as a year that we're, not going to try to, build those funds up and try to catch up in future years. So I guess with that in mind, if you'd like to look at the revised version that Jody sent through in your packets today, the area highlighted in blue shows an area where I've proposed that we could probably stand to make some reductions in the amount that we're allocating to reserve funds. So does everybody have that right now and is able to look at it? I guess just to go through from the, from the beginning. So the Parks and Open Space Reserve, over the past few financial years, we've been allocating about $5,000 to that reserve account. The current balance of that reserve account is about $17,000. So instead of allocating $25,000 this financial year, we could stand to only allocate $5,000 to that, so that it would be a $20,000 savings. The next one was the harbor dredging. So that's another, we're a few years away from any sort of need to do a dredging project. So we would be able to catch up future years with that. So that's an area where I think we could stand to reduce the amount we allocate this year from 20,000 to 10,000. So that's another $10,000 savings. The final one.
Audra, sorry to interrupt. So I like the way you presented the Parks and Open Space with the balance of the reserve at the same time, because I think it gives us a better idea of where we stand. If you could do that.
Yes. So for harbor dredging, the current balance of that account is $62,450.
Okay.
And I'll unmute Steve. Steve, how many years are we away from another maintenance dredge, requiring another maintenance dredge? Wait, I can't unmute Steve for some reason.
How about that? Does that work?
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, we're 4 years away.
So if we only put 10,000 in that reserve, so having a 72,000 reserve, that'll be enough and for this year, fiscal year, basically. It's what, okay, good.
Yeah, we would have about 3 years to try to catch up before we needed to do any work there.
Okay.
And so the final one would be the river habitat restoration. So that reserve, we currently have $30,000 in it. And I think that, we still need to, keep adding to that reserve. But I think for this year, we could get away with $20,000 in that particular account.
You also highlighted the snowball.
Yeah, I believe that was an accident.
Okay.
Yeah. I was looking at that myself.
Okay.
I fixed it.
Yeah.
I have a question about the river habitat one. I'd written a note that was to match a grant.
Yes.
So I wanted to see if we were going to lose some of the grant if we reduce that amount.
We wouldn't lose the grant. It would certainly make it more challenging. We're gonna have to get more creative with sources of match. There might, it might be difficult to apply for certain funds in this financial year without, the same level of match. But I think that we could make it work through other means.
Oh, you have to balance right here.
Thank you.
So does anybody have any questions about any of the reserve accounts or any of what's proposed either originally or changes?
Can you talk about the public landing a little bit, Audra, and where we are with that account?
So for the public landing, we are up to currently $80,000. And I guess, there's a few different things to think about with the public landing. So obviously that needs considerable amount of work done to it. And sort of I'm actually really glad you asked this question, Robin. This is one of Mark Ratner's kind of, he likes to make sure that we're keeping it in mind. So you know how this year, the proposal for capital improvements, we're going to talk about this again, but we talked about it at the beginning of the budget process, is that for the road infrastructure, this is really a good year to do some major planning and engineering work to be prepared for debt being retired in a few years. So I think it's kind of the same, it's going to be the same philosophy with the public landing. So not this financial year, but in FY22, my hope is that, members of you who are still on the budget committee will be talking about doing your engineering project for the public landing, or the major engineering work that needs to happen before the public landing can be redeveloped. So, I think that that's going to be really important next year. But I think that given the scale of that project, we're looking at potentially a $5 to $6 million project for that whole landing to be redeveloped. So it's going to take a lot of engineering and it's going to be costly. And I think it's going to be really important that, we recognize the fact that it's going to take us so long to put away enough money to pay for a project like that, that really this reserve account, I think that we need to think about it more in terms of it helping towards the planning and engineering and less towards actually funding the redevelopment of the public landing itself, because a project that large it's going to take a bond or some other sort of financing.
I have another question, if I may.
I think Randy accidentally shared his screen.
Hmm.
What happened here?
Nice going, Randy.
You gotta click on stop sharing screen.
Do we have a hand grenade?
It should be at the top of your screen. There you go.
There you go.
Who invited him anyway?
Don't look at me.
I had a question, Robin, if I may, and actually to Steve. The work, Steve, you've been doing recently with that pier, is that coming out of the capital reserves? Is that coming out of a maintenance line? What's the impact on your budget right now of this emergency work?
You're muted, Steve.
Yeah, what work are you talking about?
The replacement of the pontoons that have been hit by the storm.
Oh, well, luckily for us, the reason I left those in to be vulnerable to the vicissitudes of nature was because that was their last year, and we had already scheduled to buy new floats, so that's we're okay there.
So it's not an emergency repair. It's kind of you kept them until their last breathing day, I guess. Okay, good to know. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate. Thank you.
Right. I think with that, emergency repair would be the boardwalk.
Yeah,
That took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on Steve's part, I think, partially, right?
Yeah, the boardwalk, I think me and the highway can take care of. We don't, it's not gonna be any money, it's just gonna be labor. Just lifting it up with the backhoe and taking stuff apart and getting crap out from the joists and then putting it back down and letting it last for another 2 years till you guys build me the Taj Mahal that you're promising to build me.
I would also add that by highway, he means Public Works Department, which took me quite a while to understand. Many, many years ago, it used to be called the Highway Department, and nobody calls it that anymore except for a couple of people. But
Yeah, the old guys like me.
it's very confusing.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification for the new guys like me.
Any other questions?
So a question I have there is in the public landing. It says funding for public landing improvements, including the boardwalk, lighting, bathrooms, showers. Are we putting showers in?
There was talk about putting in showers at one point, and I think that the conceptual master plan for the public landing has showers, but there's no real firm plan to put showers in at this stage. That's all something that would have to be, decided on when the final, design and engineering plans are being developed.
So that's just put in there as a long-range possibility.
Yes.
Okay.
It was one of those three, Mark, it was one of those three master plan, that was a progressive thing, and it was taking out the pump house, it was moving the chamber, it was doing a whole bunch of stuff, and showers were part of that.
I think, in those plans, the idea was that the showers would go where the chamber building is, and that would be like a whole center.
Mark?
I can offer that CDAC had made a plan. They had a design where we could take the current building as it exists now and redesign the bathrooms so that both showers and washing machines were put in without altering the outside of the building. It would have been a nice fix if we didn't have to look at the future. But that sort of got put on hold. It was a great plan, but that got put on hold when we realized that we're going to have to redo the whole landing based on sea level rise and all of that. So it was a very inexpensive way to include that, but it's not going to work at this point.
There were also conversations at the time, or lack of conversation, because I was on CDAC at the time. There really wasn't any working with Wayfarer and what was going on, what's now Lyman Morse at the time. So where there are showers on the harbor and there are facilities over there. So it was all part of looking to the future, and that's what I think that's left in there, Mark.
Okay. Well, I remember when those bathrooms were built, the old YMCA used to be in town, and that was the showers for boaters at that time.
Correct. Yep. Allison, do you have a question?
More of just a quick comment that it might make sense, a lot of the notes here, just to take them out and have them match more clearly with what Audra said the money would be for, which is largely engineering and design rather than the actual cost of doing it, just as a, since the document is an educational document and a communication document as well. And then also I would just, having gone through the process of doing a lot of applying for grants associated with the river, there is so much funding available for projects that reduce our vulnerability to climate change and restore habitat at the same time. And we fall right within the zones of places that are really highly likely to get funding for that. So if we're willing, it's just something for people to be thinking about in the back of their minds. If we want to redesign the public landing sort of more or less the way we have it, just a little higher and a little nicer and prettier, then we'll probably have to pay for that all ourselves. But if we're willing to do something that's really innovative and is more resilient and uses more natural features rather than concrete, or does something innovative to restore habitat underneath the parking lot, or do something interesting with stormwater, then we're likely to be able to get millions of dollars in grant funding. So just sort of a long-term evolution and in thinking that I would encourage people to have in mind.
Thank you. Yeah,
So,
Carla?
Allison, who applies for those grants? How would we, and I think that's a great idea. How would we make a concerted effort to identify and apply for those grants?
Well, we have received 2 of them. So we received one from the Maine Coastal Program at the Coastal Communities Fund. And that's what we're using to look at engineering design options for the Montgomery Dam. And we also received a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for coastal resilience planning, and that, or a coastal resilience assessment grant. And we're going to look at the rest of the river system with those funds. So we have been applying for it. It's just a matter of, you know, when we have a project ready and what stage the project's at, and does it match the funding opportunity.
Mark Siegenthaler, did you have another question?
I did, about the snowball. Says that the reserve funding was ended in lieu of, oh, where are we here? I've lost it.
Debt service on the redevelopment.
Right. So now they're asking for the reserve put back in. Are we going to eliminate the debt funding? Or was that just something to get the project passed and now we're going back to the same old funding?
So this wasn't the first year that we brought back some reserve funds for the snowball. This would be the second year that we funded that. We didn't fund anything from last year because in FY19, I believe, there was, you know, the snowball finished the season with, you know, they did their budget in terms of revenues. And so because of that, when we were budgeting in FY20, we didn't budget for any reserve. However, we know this year we're not ending the season with any exceedance of budget. I think the snowball, they're a little under budget in terms of revenues. So it's more of just acknowledging the reality that, you know, there are sometimes years when the snowball does well, and there's sometimes years where it does less well. And, you know, if we want it to continue, sometimes the town does have to contribute towards its viability.
Mark Haskell, do you have a question?
No, I was just checking to see how I actually got on to talk.
Oh, okay. There you are. You're live.
I'm live this week, so continue.
Great, thank you. Sophie?
Yes, Alison, thank you so much for sharing the comments on grants, and Audra for giving the update. Is there a way to add those grants to the budget package maybe for next year so we can see them in the budget as well? Because I think it's interesting to track them and to see where we get our funding.
So it wouldn't be part of the operational budget, but we could certainly show you, we call them restricted funds.
Yeah.
So
Wouldn't it show up as a revenue source?
No, we don't include it in the operational budget.
But yeah, adding a restricted fund tab or whatever in the future budget would be helpful.
Yep. And it would be much like with you know, the printout of reserve accounts that we sent.
Yes.
All, it would be similar to that.
Yes.
Wow, cool. Yeah, because I mean, we've gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants. I didn't realize that doesn't show up anywhere in the budget.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions for Audra on that? Audra, do we need a motion on this one this evening? And
yeah, and I guess just to kind of, this is probably what I should have led off with to this whole discussion around, you know, the 3 different areas that you're going to be looking at tonight. So we sort of went back after the last meeting because I think that the strong message that came through to all of us was that you know, the situations had changed, and it seemed like the budget committee was interested in seeing how we could get sort of as close to, you know, a 0% increase over this financial year as possible. So that's really what we kept in mind when we were looking at these last three areas, you know, capital reserves, capital improvements. And on the revenue side of things, we also wanted to sort of adjust for the new reality that we're all facing right now. So that's really kind of the impetus behind a lot of these changes. So it's just, you know, we threw that out there as some options for you in terms of looking to reduce our, you know, overall net expenditures, adjusting the, you know, the different reality in terms of what we can probably expect with revenues, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
And do you feel comfortable with these, Audra? These, I mean, we're looking at this now as your recommended budget. So,
yeah, I mean, it's always of greater comfort to, I guess, to put more money away in reserve accounts. But, you know, in a year where we're really trying to, you know, come in as close to zero as possible, and we're being very mindful of, you know, impact on taxpayers, to me, it kind of makes sense to say, you know, these are the areas where we can do with putting away less money, and in future years where we're able, we will do our best to catch up.
Allison?
Did you look at all, or is this going to be a topic for a later conversation? I just went back and listened to the budget committee meeting from last time that I missed, and there was a lot of discussion about whether it made sense to freeze wages for at least, you know, for the next year, and wondering what the budget impact of that would be. Is that anything that you?
Yeah, we did look at that, so we can tell you what those numbers would be overall.
I think that falls under the category of looking at suggestions for ways to move forward as well, Allison, if we want to get to that later. Mark, you have a question?
Yes, is it appropriate this time to make a motion to accept the reserve figures as presented by the manager?
It is appropriate. Would you like to make that motion?
I would like to make that motion that we accept the reserve account numbers as a slate as presented by the town manager.
And I'll second that.
And that's for a total of $155,000, just to clarify, if anybody doesn't have that in front of them. We have a second. Any further discussion on that? No? Okay, we'll take, nope, okay, we'll take a roll call vote. And again, if you could unmute yourself for the vote, that would be great. And if I miss anybody, let me know. I'm just going to go down with people. If somebody came in late, I won't have them. Lisa Dresser?
Yes.
Yes. Judy, now tell me again, now that I've been saying it wrong for the last month.
Shelby.
Shelby, okay, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Lorna Cummings?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Mark Haskell?
Yes.
Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Sandy Cox?
Yes.
Carla Dorima Stranfield? That was a yes, I think.
Yes.
Kristen Sidwell?
Yes.
Yes. Mary Winchell?
Yes.
Wendy Rich?
Yes.
Sophie Romana?
Yes.
Courtney Sukforth?
Yes.
Courtney, yes. Beth Doan?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And did I miss anybody?
Tyler Smith, yes.
Tyler, you're back? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So the motion passes for 155,000. So thank you. And thank you for those suggested adjustments, Audra. So next up then would be capital improvements.
Yes. So, you know, to kind of talk about the projects, just to refresh everybody's memory, because we did talk about them, but it's been almost a month ago. So what's being proposed for this year is a new police cruiser. So the 48,000 would be for a hybrid patrol rated cruiser. A new plow truck. Currently, we have a plow truck that's at the end of its life, and this is something that's been on the table for about 5 years. We're really at a point where we're retiring the debt from another plow truck that was purchased years ago. So it's kind of a good point in time to bite the bullet and purchase this piece of equipment. In addition, there's the public works equipment, which is a mini excavator. So the 120,000, that would be offset by 50% of the cost of that being paid for by the wastewater treatment plant. Both the plow truck and the mini excavator are both going to be financed. I believe it's over a 15-year term. Is that correct, Jody, for both of them?
I believe so. I'm just going to double check that.
Yeah. So just to we'll come back to Jody when she set up. So the one cut that I'm proposing is the 25,000 for additional upgrades to the conference room. That's something that should the select board decide they want to move forward with, we can find other sources of funding for those improvements.
Audra,
Yes.
on that, for the conference room, was any of that earmarked for the roof repairs and work on the building that was discussed at the selectmen's meeting last night or a couple nights ago?
That would all be for audiovisual system upgrades.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nadra, it is financed over 15 years.
Great, thank you very much, Jody. So the next one is harbor float replacement. So Sophie asked the question before about the floats that were replaced this year. So this is, a multi-year effort to make sure that we're getting rid of all the floats that are that have unencapsulated polystyrene, so that we can be in compliance with the ordinance that was recently passed. And we're trying to pick away at that, doing about $50,000 worth of float replacement work every year until we're at the point where everything that needs to be replaced has been.
How many years is that going to take?
So, Steve, do you remember exactly how far away we are from everything being replaced? You're on mute again.
It would be about three years.
And we're in year 2 or another 3 years?
Yeah, another 3 years after this one.
Okay.
And how long is the cycle, Steve?
Well, these new floats, I would imagine, are going to last anywhere between 18 to 20 years.
Oh.
And Steve, if we skipped a year in replacing, how much would that set us back other than just the year?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Financially, or the fact that we're not going to meet the deadline?
Yeah, how long before we have to meet that deadline? And going on the fact that we may have a lot less use of them this summer for obvious reasons, if we were to hold off a year, not postpone it, but hold off 1 year, would that set us back too far as the replacement time is concerned?
Well, in a sense, yes, it would, because we've got 3 systems. We got 3 systems still that need to get replaced. We've got the ones at the head of the harbor that serve the 3 windjammers at the library park. We have the turnover dinghy dock in front of my office, and then we've got the 86-foot long overnight dock that still needs to get replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Right, and for this particular one, the 50,000 for float repair, I've highlighted that in blue because I'm proposing that we have a corresponding revenue to offset the cost of that. And that revenue would be use of the reserve fund. And that would be the harbor project reserve, which we currently have $106,000 in. So,
What was that reserve slated for, Audra?
that reserve can be used for basically any sort of harbor related project. And that's a really good question, Robin. Some of these reserve funds were created so long ago that determining sort of the original purpose for them is a lot of sort of excavation. So we've just got to try to, be as close to the definition that we have on hand as possible.
Thank you.
So the next, potential area that we could cut is the street light acquisition, conversion to LED. And I'm not suggesting that we cut that because we don't want to do that project, but I do think that we can find other sources of funding to make up that difference. So there's that. And then the largest one is the repairs to the Molyneux Road bridges. It would be ideal to do this project in this financial year, but I think with everything that's going on right now, that's one thing that, the bridge isn't going to fail if we don't do it this year. There is spalling on the concrete underneath the bridge, which means from, periodically there's a little bit of concrete that kind of falls off the bottom side of the bridge into the river. So that's going to continue to happen, but it's not really undermining the bridge isn't going to fail. And, we could look at doing this project next year when we have more certainty about, what's going on financially with the town. So, those are the areas where, we could stand to hold off on projects or make some cuts.
Can you, Audra, the streetlight acquisition conversion to LED, on the version I have, I see budget for FY20, 160,000. I don't have any number under department head or town manager. Do I have a wrong version?
So it was this year I had originally proposed $20,000 to make up for some of the unanticipated costs associated with that project. So, it was a little more expensive to buy out the streetlights from CMP, for example, than anticipated. There was some grounding and wiring issues that made it a little bit more expensive. And sort of those little unanticipated costs added up to about $20,000.
$20,000, okay.
Yeah, so that was the original number that was in there.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not looking at the right line. Is it 304-4217?
It is.
So Sophie, there was this is the change. The ones in blue change from what was originally proposed in the budget book. So if you want to see what was originally there, you have to go back to the original page 37 in the budget book.
I see what you mean. Okay. All right.
So Audra, I have a question. Your answer about this $20,000 and where that would come from was a little vague. Have you identified already where that money could come from?
Yeah, it could come from the select board contingency or contingency account. That's another area in the CIP that the CIP area of the budget. So we currently have 40,000 budgeted for FY21, but we have funds from prior financial years that have been carried forward and were unspent. So that's an area where we could make up for the difference with this project. And we're not even certain if it's going to be a total of 20,000 that's needed to make up the difference for that project, because the grounding and wiring portion of that project, it's really just an allowance in case the installer, when they're actually converting to the LEDs, if they run across grounding and wiring issues, they're not even certain that they necessarily will. They're just projecting that there will be some issues that they need to account for, and that's why they've asked for additional funds for that part of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mark Siegenthaler? Mark, did you have a quick, Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I guess I just don't understand the, where are we here? The 120,000 for the equipment. That's going to be financed over 15 years. So is it 120,000 for 15 years?
No, okay, so the way that this works is when we have a piece of equipment or a project that we're going to finance, we put it in this year's, like the year of whatever year we're budgeting it for in the CIP, we put the full amount in there. And then on the revenue side, we show bond proceeds or loan proceeds, however we're financing it. And then next year, when you look at the budget again, that's when you'll see the first actual debt service payment come up. So the year that it's initially approved, it shows up in the CIP, both as an expense and then as a revenue. And then the preceding financial years is when you actually see it as a debt service payment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So, and then the reason it went from 60 to 120 is this includes the wastewater department portion of it?
Yeah, so what we're going to do, the town is going to, finance the entire, purchase of the equipment. And then when we're paying on the debt service, the wastewater department will pay half the debt service. So so in FY22, you'll see on the town's version of the budget, half the debt service payment, and then the other half will be contained in the wastewater budget.
Thank you.
Mark Haskell, you looked like you were getting ready to say something.
Yes, I would. You mentioned earlier that there are some things in this budget because of circumstances that we may have to adjust. Are some of these numbers, some of those considerations that if suddenly it hits the fan and we really are at a lack of everything, that some of these numbers would be up to the selectmen to change or adjust?
I would say that the tack that I took was I'm giving you suggestions to sort of get the budget as close to a 0% increase as possible.
Okay, but these are some of the areas where in the future could be readjusted when it comes time to actually put the bridge repairs out for bid or something of that nature. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, it kind of depends on so this would be, your recommendation would either be to put it in or take it out. And then
my recommendation is to leave it in, knowing that they can at a later date alter it if it's necessary.
Yeah, that's certainly an option. I'm giving you kind of just, like I said, option to get you as close to 0 as possible. But if that's, if you would rather, put some of these projects in, because like Robin said, once you take them out, they're out. But if you leave them in, we could always take them out later. That's certainly.
That's what I'm interested in. Leave them in at this point in time. I appreciate what you have done for cutting or kind of rounding down a little bit, but I think we should leave them in and then trust the select board to do their job if it's necessary.
Robin?
Yeah, Sandy.
We made adjustments in 2008 and 2009 the same way to try to bring in a 0 budget. So these are pretty typical reductions that we've seen. And we had concerns back then of taking too much out, but it's worked out all right, looking back 10 years.
Thank you. Mark Ratner?
I was just going to say, Mark, I think what you're saying is correct. I think it's good to bring the budget to close to zero as Audra has tried to do. So, excuse me. So we have a workable budget to work with, but we don't know what's going to happen. And if things get worse, I'm fully committed to making changes to help us through this. I mean, we have to be responsive to the way the world changes, and we don't know what that's going to be. So we should start with a workable budget, and then we'll go from there.
Carla?
And to support what Mark said, this budget that the town approves, right, that's going to be what our taxes are based on. So giving people an increase of 3 or 4% in their tax bill versus a flat tax bill, I think really sends a message that we're not on top of this. I'd feel better going to the taxpayers saying we're not going to increase you, or we're going to increase you as little as possible. And continue to do our due diligence than just hit them with a big number that people aren't prepared for.
Allison?
I mean, I would say that some of the idea of trusting putting things in and trusting the select board to cut later if we, deem it prudent, is nice to hear the vote of confidence, although of course it might not even be me, but I think that it also ends up being used as, it is kind of hard later on for the select board to say, well, we shouldn't do this, because usually the next time we hear about a project that's been budgeted for is when it'll already have gone out to bid, and then it comes back to us on an agenda and we're approving a bid. And I feel like if we say at that point, well, I don't really think that was necessary given the economic situation of the community, I feel like what ends up being said is, well, I feel like the budget committee wanted to do it, or they weren't concerned at all about fixing the Mullino Bridge, even though we're saying it really doesn't need to be fixed. I would say in particular, that one to me stands out as something that we may be able to get a stream crossing grant for it. It's probably not the best candidate because it already does have good fish passage, but if it's, I don't know why we would budget $200,000 for a bridge that doesn't need to be replaced quite yet. There are some warning signs, but then also there's, I'm not seeing on here anything for the Rawson Ave Bridge, which to me, that one may actually need some funding because we're waiting on the state to decide when they're gonna take out the bridge because it's not repairable, and oftentimes they've been threatening to even close it to pedestrian and bike traffic. So there may be that comes up, that we really do need to do something in order to be able to get pedestrians and bikes across there. We're looking at a footbridge, so I don't know if that's somewhere else in the budget that I missed, but if we're in terms of reserve funds. And then the only other thing that I have been personally really curious to get budget committee input on, and I don't see that Audra has suggested that it be taken out, is the voting booths. And this is maybe a small and petty issue, but since we are looking at cutting $10,000 here or there, I personally am thoroughly unconvinced that we need to replace all of our voting booths. And the alternative to them, again, this is just my personal opinion, but I think Camden residents aren't going to like it. I don't like them. They're these foldable kind of plastic things that are in these, some of you may have seen one sample that was in the town office for early voting. And I don't know, I think we should just keep trying to weld our old ones together and that they're not that bad, so.
Mark, can you hang on a second? Judy had a question first.
Oh, I'm okay with that, but I would agree with Allison on the voting booths. I mean, I don't see what's wrong with our current system. My question
It's arduous. It's arduous for staff.
I'm
sorry, Judy, can you repeat that? You got talked over.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to know when to come in. You heard me, what I said about the voting booths, that I agree with what Allison said. And I was just curious about what why the Molyneux thing was in there. I mean, I thought maybe somebody had felt that was a high priority, but listening to Allison, I totally understand what she said in support. What she was saying, that maybe this isn't the time, if the bridge is fine, if it's safe, to be putting that large amount in.
Audra, would you like to address that?
Well, I mean, I would say that it's something that it needs to be done. There is, you know, concrete. A lot of people row under that bridge. You know, I saw people kayaking and, you know, crew, you know, people doing crew under that bridge.
Under the Mullen, am I thinking of the wrong one? Under the Molyneux?
Yeah, there's concrete falling off the
No,
bottom.
I understand there's concrete, but I've certainly never seen a kayaker try to, I mean, you're going to hit the east and west band.
Just this weekend.
You know, there's nowhere to go after that.
Under that, I mean, you know. So anyway, but what it's, like I said, it's, you know, not like the bridge is going to fail. And if you're driving over it in a car, you're going to be fine. If you're walking over it, you're going to be fine. So it's something that needs to be, but in a year where we're looking to, you know, kind of tighten our belts, it's something that we can wait for another time to do.
What about
Mark,
Rossin? Is there anything in here for the Rossineff Bridge?
No, and a lot of that is because of where that is. That's not even on the DOT's work plan. So I wouldn't suggest budgeting any money for that project until it's at the very least on their work plan.
Mark Haskell?
Yes, as far as the voting booths are concerned, we may be having a whole different way of voting this next coming year. So I don't necessarily think it's necessary to replace them at the moment. We may be inventing a whole new way to vote. So who knows at this point in time?
Thank you. Mark Siegenthaler, you had a question as well, or comment?
I did. And Audra, on Public Works equipment, the line there, you changed that from 60 to 120 on the numbers, but in the explanation, it says that that's for half. I would suggest that just for future records, that be corrected and saying that's for the full excavator and that half of it will be shared.
Yes, we can change the note so we specify and say that, you know, we're going to finance the whole cost of it and then split the actual
right
debt service payment between the, you know, the general fund and the wastewater budget.
So if that were changed, just in the future, it'd be clear how it's paid for.
I think that's a great point. I'd like people to look back and know what we did and why.
Yeah, good, thank you.
And I think too, in response, Allison just left the room, but in response to some of what Allison was saying, as far as this going on to the select board and wanting input from the budget committee, I think we are providing that input, but also, I mean, I think we're going to pass this on with a caveat that we know that this, you know, we know that this is a weird time and that there's stuff that's going to have to be done. I don't think at any point, if this gets to the select board, and that's Audra's job to make sure that if revenue isn't coming in, that this budget is meeting that, or that's not good. We can't end up in the red at the end of the year. So that's up to her with guidance from the select board. But I mean, I don't think at all, Allison, that we're saying this is 100% what we recommend and don't take it into consideration. I think we're saying, I think what we're going to say is that we're passing this on with the caveat that we know that changes are going to have to be made, and you know, that it's going to be a different year. Things are going to have to happen differently. Mark Haskell?
Yes, I would like to do as I did before, make a motion that we pass the capital improvements budget as presented by the town manager.
I have a quick question. Sorry, Mark.
Can I just suggest we get a second, if there's a second for that, and then we have a conversation?
Well, are we going to take out the 10 for the voting booths, or we're leaving that in?
Yeah, I'm not
Well,
clear what we're voting on.
There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second so that we can discuss it.
Okay, and then discussion. So Courtney?
So is just, I know that we had talked about the police cruiser a little bit before, the hybrid, which is really cool. I think that will help, you know, emissions and gas usage and everything like that. But is that a necessity that they need this year, specifically if we're talking about shaving off pricing and, you know, all that stuff? Like, is there a car or a cruiser right now that's dying and it needs to be replaced, or can that wait another year?
On the cruiser part, I think anything that has to do with public safety and first responders may be extremely necessary in the next years to come. So I would say keep that in there.
Audra, is Randy still here? I know he was here.
Yeah, the cat jumped on my computer before. That's why I had problems.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's time to cycle that cruiser into a secondary role. The one that we'll be cycling is getting up toward 100,000 miles, but we've also going into our 5th year with that car. And like I explained at the budget committee, we used to use these cars for 2 years and then cycle them out. Now we're getting much more life out of them. I'll use that vehicle as a secondary for animal control and for officers to go to training and whatnot to save mileage. We do have a Dodge Charger that we will trade, but I don't expect much for the trade.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Courtney?
Yes, yeah, totally. Yeah, I figured they wouldn't be putting one in unless they really needed one, but I didn't know if it was to the point where it could get another year or if it was, you know.
Well, it will get another year because we'll use it as a secondary role. We'll trade an old
Right.
Dodge Charger that we have. So we'll get about 6 years out of that vehicle, which is really good.
Awesome.
Thank you. Judy, you have a question or a comment?
Oh, I didn't know. Was this the time? I mean, if we wanted to take out the 10,000 for the voting booths, can we still do that? Or is now that the motion's been?
No, we can have a motion to amend the motion.
So could I make an amendment to amend the motion that we take out the $10,000 for the voting booths for the time being?
Robin, you really need to go to a second and then go for an amendment.
Excuse me?
You should go for a second on the motion and then in discussion you can amend.
We had a second on the original motion. So
would it help if I amended the motion that I'm making to have that part withdrawn?
Okay, so is that a second to Judy's? That's basically a second to Judy's motion to take the 10,000 out?
Yes.
So we have a motion then to vote. And so the process is that we vote on the motion to amend the original motion, and then we can go back to that original motion as amended. So it's any conversation on that second motion?
Robin, Chris Farley.
Yes, Chris Farley.
So I don't really have a dog in a fight over the voting booths other than being the person responsible for setting them up and taking them down every time they get used. They're over 20 years old. I heard the suggestion to have a welder fix them. I've talked to the welder. That's not something that's really possible and financially feasible. At some point, those voting booths are going to need to be replaced.
Audra, a question for you. There's, as Mark Haskell brought up earlier, we don't know what processes will be for voting in the future. Do you see there being, I mean, there's conversation over paper ballots and going digital and voting online. Do you see that impacting that at all?
I mean, we're always going to have a polling place with voting booths. That's never going to change the requirement to do that. I mean, more people are voting absentee and through mail-in ballots, but it's really not going to change the requirement that we have a polling station and voting booths available.
Carla?
So Chris, when you say at some point they're going to have to be replaced, how much life do you think you can squeeze out of them? Acknowledging that it's a pain, but can we put it off for a year or maybe 2 in recognition of the budget constraints we're going to be under?
Yeah, is it an immediate need? I don't think it's an immediate need. Could it be something that could be put off? Sure, but I'm just saying, you know, it's not something that can be put off forever.
Audra, do you have a thought or comment?
This request came from the clerk, and I think that, and I wish I could sort of speak to this, from a place of being better informed about it. All I can tell you is what has been passed on to me, and I guess they're sort of not all of them, but certain booths are kind of at a point where pieces are falling off and there's no way to replace parts. And like Chris said, there's really no good way to fix them in a cost-effective manner. So, kind of the idea was just to replace them all at once, maybe leave some of the ones that are in the best condition available so that people who prefer the older booths can still use them, but having the new ones available so that we don't have to look at, comparing and sort of patching together the old ones that really aren't in a good state where they can be easily repaired or replacement parts found.
Okay. Carla, do you have something?
Yeah, has that become a safety or capacity issue yet?
No, I don't believe it's either one.
Okay, thanks. Table
And
this.
This came to the select board before, and we were uncomfortable with it because of the not as much privacy in voting and a few other things. And we said, we're all volunteering. We want to help to set up and take down for the next election, which was the last one, so that we can better understand the issues with the voting booths. And maybe I'm being petty, but nobody wanted our help. They said we would rather not have help. So it just doesn't, I don't know. It's a small thing, but.
Okay, was there another comment? I thought I saw somebody else over on the other side of the screen. No? Okay, we have a motion to amend the original motion to take out the $10,000. So we will have to do a roll call vote on that. And then depending on how that vote goes, then vote on the original motion that was made by Mark. So we have Lisa Dresser.
Yes,
So that is yes to remove the 10,000.
correct.
Okay, Judy,
Yes.
yes. Lorna Cummings,
Yes.
yes. I'll be a yes. Mark Haskell,
Yes.
Mark Siegenthaler,
Yes.
Sandy Cox,
Yes.
Carla Doremus Tranfield,
Yes.
Kristen Sidwell,
Yes.
Mary Winchell. Mary, you're muted, Mary. Yes, okay.
Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. Wendy Rich,
Yes.
Sophie Romano,
Yes.
Courtney Sukeforth,
Yes.
Beth Doan,
Yes.
and Tyler Smith.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a new motion, which is to accept this minus the 10,000 for the voting booths, which will bring that to 743,000, if I do the math correctly. So we will roll call on that then for the new amount. I'm going to go in the other direction. Let's do Tyler.
Yes.
Beth Doan?
Yes.
Yes. Courtney?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes.
Romana? Wendy Rich?
Yes.
Mary Winchell?
Yes.
Kristen Sidwell?
Yes.
Carla Doremus Tranfield?
Yes.
Sandy Cox?
Yes.
Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Mark Haskell?
Yes.
Yes, and I am a yes. Lorna Cummings?
Yes.
Yes. Judy Scheibel?
Yes.
Yes. Lisa Dresser?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody? We're all set. So the motion passes for $743,000, eliminating that 10,000 and taking Audra's others suggestions into consideration. So that's capital improvement. Next is revenues. Audra? You're muted, Audra.
Sorry about that, everyone. So for revenues, I think it would be useful if everyone could compare, the updated version that was sent through to you today, the changes that are highlighted in blue, green sheet that's in your binder. I think that would be helpful. So does everybody have both of those documents?
What page are you looking at?
So in your original binder, it's under tab 2. And in the version that you got today, it's page, I don't think there's a page number on it because it's its own spreadsheet, but it's got revenues at the top.
So, and in the binder, it was the green sheet, correct?
Yes.
Audra, I don't mean to interrupt, but should we have them also vote in or make a vote on contingency as well?
Oh, yes. Sorry. That's a good point, Jody. Thank you. Robin, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that. It's a very small area within the capital budget. It's a line that just says contingency and it's $40,000. It's on page, excuse me.
39.
39, yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the town manager's recommendation on the contingency account.
Is there a second? Seconded. Okay, any discussion? Audra, would you like to describe what that is or how that works?
So really that is just for emergencies or unanticipated projects or expenses. It just provides a little bit of flexibility should a need arise.
Can't see anything.
And is that just for the year 40,000 or is there's money already in that account or?
So there is some money that's been carried forward from prior financial years, but I'm thinking particularly given the high levels of uncertainty that we're looking at coming into FY21 that, I would not recommend, cutting anything from the contingency line.
Robin?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you're sure that's enough, given the extreme level of uncertainty that we're heading into this year.
Audra?
I mean, that's a good point, Lorna. And that might be, you might all want to hold off on voting on contingency till after we do revenues and we see where we are in terms of net expenditures. So that's an option for you all as well.
Is it appropriate to ask what sorts of things in the past the contingency fund has been used towards?
Yep, that's completely appropriate, Lisa. So there have been years where, for example, and this wouldn't happen this year given our discussions about legal services, but there have been years where, we've had unanticipated legal expenses and the contingency has funded that. There have been years where we've had overruns on certain capital projects. The contingencies help to fund those. There have been, emergency repairs to equipment or buildings. Contingency can help with that. There might be a grant opportunity, for example, where it's a perfect fit for a need, but we, given the point in time we were at in developing the budget, we just weren't able to plan for it and budget for, a match for that grant. So contingency funds have been used for those sorts of purposes as well. Any members of the select board that can think of anything, feel free to chime in.
The Opera House stuff that just came in with the urgent need to deal with the ice and the leaking and.
Yep.
Right. And Audra, back a few years ago when the boiler blew up in the town hall, that was a $70,000 ticket that came out of this kind of an account.
Yes.
What do we have in there now, Audra?
The boiler, main boiler that provides hot water for both heating and use of hot water in the basement of the town hall opera house building just blew up, and it had to be replaced in January of all times of that given year, and that was about a $70,000 bill.
And how much is coming forward, Audra, from the prior year?
That's a perfect Jody question.
Sorry. We currently have about 98,000 in contingency funds this year.
But I guess another point is some of that has already been encumbered by the select board for certain projects.
A lot of it, right?
Yes, a lot of it.
Yes.
Lisa Dresser, did you have a question?
Well, I was just curious as to, and this may not even be, you may not even have an answer to this, but in this uncertain time, you said going forward, what sorts of things are you anticipating that could happen that these funds may be necessary for that maybe haven't been in the past?
I mean, that's
seawall could collapse.
Yeah, a seawall could collapse. Randy's 100,000-mile cruiser could just break down to the point where it's not worth repairing it. I mean, the list of
But
things.
we just approved his cruiser.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, but things like that, you just don't know. But Audrey, my question, just to be clear, because I only have the existing sheet, which says contingency is adding 40,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's low.
There's 90 something in it.
Things go wrong with the dams. Virtually every time a dam has had to be repaired, except for actually the last one that came in a little under. But things keep cropping up, and select board contingency has been robbed for that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good example that I think I heard somebody mention about, I think Allison did, about the building where just the other night approved a budget to repair and hopefully stop the leaking of the water into the town hall building, to finally stop the potential for ice dams and ice falling off the roof. And thirdly, to replace the copper gutters, which hadn't been replaced for many years. That total ticket was came out to about $250,000. We had to dip into, Audra can explain, that whole amount didn't have to come out of reserve, but about 15% of it did.
And I guess that project originally we had budgeted 120,000 in FY20. And so then when, the final bid came in, like when we had a full scope of work and the final bid came in, it was $250,000. It was fortunate that we had a bunch of other, reserve funds as well as contingency that we could make up that difference.
Mark Siegenthaler?
So just for point of discussion, I'd like to throw out the concept of adding 100,000 to that and calling it 140,000 for the contingency fund.
Can I ask, is that a motion? We can go back for a quick second. Can I just ask a question, Audra? How beholden are you line item by line item to the budget as it goes through? Say something were to happen and a dam fell apart and you have to, that's the kind of thing that I think we're asking, that moving forward, you have to manage that to say, gee, we just had an extra $100,000 expense. Maybe we can't buy, for sake of argument, that fire truck or that police cruiser going forward. You're not beholden line item by line item. You have latitude to move within the budget.
We do. Really, it comes down to, when you go to town meeting and you vote on the different areas like the general government, the public safety, leisure services, and then debt, capital, and contingency. We have to stay within the budgeted amounts for each of those lines that you vote on at town meeting, but we have flexibility within those categories.
But we're not going to be able to use cruiser money on a seawall. That's the good thing. The contingency is what allows us latitude. So if that's even like with the $200,000 for the Molyneux Bridge, that we can't really use that on anything else. But if we were to have that money in the contingency and then decide we needed to do something with the Molyneux Bridge, then we could use that.
Mark Ratner?
My understanding is if we have a major failure somewhere and we don't have the funds within the categories to fix it. We have to go to a town vote to take the funds out of the somewhere else. And that could be a lengthy process in an emergency situation.
Correct. Mark Haskell, do you have a question?
Yes, Mark Ratner basically just said what I was going to say. Anything over a certain dollar amount has to go back before anyways. So our contingency fund, it would nice to be put a lot in there and say, now we can meet anything, but it still is going to have to go before town meeting or special town meeting, anything above a certain amount. So I don't know if we really need to put that much more into it at this point in time.
I don't understand the comment about it has to go to a town meeting for use of contingency.
No, for if you don't have enough money in contingency.
Oh.
Sophie, do you have a question?
What I'm saying is, depending on what the emergency is, you can only spend so much on anything before it has to go. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. If it's not budgeted, it still has to be go back before some kind of special town meeting.
I see a lot of heads nodding no.
I don't believe that's correct.
No, I mean, there've been a number of different, emergencies or, projects that we've had that were unanticipated for whatever reason. And, we've been able to kind of piece together funding from different, reserve accounts or areas in the budget. Really, the only time we would have to go back to voters is when it's something that we just don't have any funds available anywhere for.
Right. A good example of that, Audra, again, to the boiler that exploded some years ago. There was no money in the maintenance of the building to cover that kind of a hit. That 70 or the lion's share of the 70,000 came out of contingency period, and we did not go to a town meeting for that.
Sophie, you have a question?
I do. Thanks, Robin. So I'm struggling a little bit because it seems that this contingency fund is designed for something that could happen to a boiler or whatever. But what are the specific risks we're seeing with the pandemic right now? What is the contingency? What could the contingency be used for related to the particular situation we're in? And I'm concerned that we're not budgeting enough for whatever could happen with the pandemic. I'm struggling to understand how we're considering mapping the risks that the town could face and budgeting accordingly to answer to those potential risks. The boilers, we know those, right? They're kind of known. So what are the unknown unknowns that we're trying to build a contingency for in the particular situation we're in? Is it a staffing issue? Is it a loss of revenues? Or is it, we have to build a field hospital in front of the library in October? I'm just trying to understand, what are we trying to plan the contingency for?
Mark Ratner, you had something? Was that an answer?
I was just going to mention, we did have a reserve fund for the building that did pay for the boiler. We did have funds for that in the Opera House reserve fund, I believe. But to answer the problem, I wish I knew what the emergencies were so we could prepare for them. We had no idea the boiler was going to explode. I can't speak to what we're going to need the money for, but having some funds to be prepared is not a bad thing. It's a savings account.
I'm not disputing that. What I'm trying to assess is that because we are in an unusual and extraordinary situation, I'm thinking that we should build up that contingency fund much more than it is right now, especially if $98,000 of it is already committed from the select board on other projects, and leaving us with not enough emergency funds to face whatever is going to come or not, hopefully, in the coming month.
Allison?
So I would say that one thing that we should keep in mind is that anything like in terms of coronavirus emergency contingency funding, some of the quick little things that come to mind would be just things like Zoom licenses or additional personal protective equipment, or maybe even subsidizing recycling or waste disposal or something like that. Paying for more people to replace maybe some staff who are vulnerable, but also there's this broad area of trust funds that we have that is really, really sizable. And so that can't be used for things like just offsetting the general budget, but it can be used, our largest trust fund, what was left in the deed says for the poor and unfortunate residents of Camden. And that's, it's in sort of old archaic language a little bit, but it can be interpreted broadly to help people who are Camden residents who are in need. So in terms of, we don't need to put anything that can fall under that category, doesn't need to go in some kind of a select board contingency. But things that might not fall into like specifically helping a Camden resident who's in a verifiably, unfortunate or vulnerable position, then we would want in the select board.
So I would suggest, if I may, that before we present this budget to the town, that the select board addresses the current pandemic, COVID-19, by saying we have identified some of the risks, we have made we know which funds we can tap into. I think it would be irresponsible to go in front of the town, not at least having put that into paper, saying we've thought about this. We have to have somewhere in the budget something that highlights the plan the board has for this.
Lorna?
These are donor directed funds. So it operates it's very different than the general budget. It's more like we've ended up with a little nonprofit organization within our town. And the way it works is that the select board doesn't have control over that. It's the Trust Fund Advisory Committee, which is 2 members of the select board. Currently it's Jenna and I. It's the town manager, the town finance director, and
GA director.
And Janice, the assistant to the town manager. So, and some of the funds, the desire of the donor was for it to be not with, it's stated not with unnecessary fanfare. So we use that to fund our general assistance program, which all towns have a general assistance program, which is normally funded largely by the state. And so people come in all the time to the town office saying, they need money for this or that, or we can give Hannaford vouchers, things like that. So I think it is known that the town is there as like a support service for vulnerable populations, but it's not totally just like a select board thing. I mean, you're right that it should be communicated, kind of just like
it has to be. My point, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Alison. I think it has to be communicated because 100% somebody's going to ask a question. And we have to be prepared to answer this and to say that we have taken our responsibility and looked at different funds that we could tap into if an emergency related to COVID-19 was to arise. And I would also suggest that we increase the contingency fund.
Lorna has been waiting patiently.
Hi, yeah, so I just think that we should look at the revenues as Audra suggested. And then I think the revenues taking a hit is very, very likely. And I know that's been considered, it's considered in her new sheet, but I just think that's could be terrible. I mean, it could be even worse than what you have for numbers, I think. So I think that's something we could look at after revenues.
I was going to suggest that as well, Lorna, and Mark, you kind of had I think you had a suggestion of the start of a motion there. I was going to suggest that we hold off on, we do have a motion and a second on this, but to look at it after, as Audra suggested, go ahead and look at the revenues and then come back to this, knowing that there is a motion on the table.
Fine by me, whatever the proper procedure is, I'll withdraw the motion or whatever we have to do for the proper procedure.
we can come back to the motion, but I just think, Audra, it's almost like it's part of the discussion of it is getting a little bit more information before we move forward. Judy?
Oh, just quickly, I was wondering, will there be time to go back to what you brought up earlier? I didn't realize that if I had suggestions about revisions to the budget, I was supposed to email them. Is there going to be an opportunity to raise that just briefly? I know we don't need a huge discussion, but, or can I still submit suggestions?
Absolutely still submit. I mean, it's to go to the select board so that they have that information. So it was just if anybody wanted to have that come up this evening too, so let's see where we end up and we can have time to discuss it. And I would strongly suggest people send in those suggestions to probably to Bob and Audra moving forward.
Okay, because I just had concerns given what Allison had said about how hard, and having been on a school board before, I realized that how hard it is once you're in that position and you have the budget to be the one to then go back and say, well, we want to take this out or we want to reduce this. I mean, I'd like to see the budget going forward reflect what we do. I mean, and tonight we cut a lot. We did change a lot of things. So we've changed half the budget, but not the other part.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So retain us.
Good, thank you. So Audra, do you want to go to revenues and then?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So I guess the first area where I thought we really needed to look at adjusting was the revenue sharing. So to give you a little background on revenue sharing, the $200,000 that was budgeted in FY20, that was prior, that was kind of, I guess, to put it crudely, that was based off LePage numbers. And then there was a lot of adjustment that was made when the Mills administration passed their first budget and increased the amount of revenue sharing available to towns. Jody, do you have a year-to-date number on what we've gotten for revenue sharing or what we've collected in revenue sharing? I think that'd be helpful for the budget committee to have an idea of where we're at.
Yep, let's see. We have receipted 200 and I'm sorry, hold on. We've netted 155,000 today.
Mm-hmm. So I'm, even with in the current financial year, they've had to adjust figures downward. I still think that we're going to comfortably collect the 200,000 for this year. And I still think that we can, given that the overall proportion of revenue sharing that the state has committed to has increased in this budget over FY20, I still think even with, a really bad year in terms of, revenue that the state's going to expect from sales tax, that 250,000 is realistic. We had gone into this financial year budgeting 300 and hoping that we'd collect more like 400. So that's why I think that even though 250,000 is an increase over what we budgeted in FY20, it's still realistic for FY21. It's still a pretty conservative number. So that was, it's still 50,000 less than what we, originally budgeted for when this budget was first prepared, but I still think that it's realistic. So down to the next major change, vehicle excise tax. So we've been pretty consistently collecting about $1 million since FY17. Given the state of the economy, I wanted to adjust that downward to about 850,000. Despite everything that's going on, we still are seeing, people purchasing new vehicles. A lot of that has to do, it's still happening. So, I didn't want to, I think that that's still pretty realistic. We won't know until, we're in it as to what's actually happening. But, that's kind of just a best guess at this point. For boat excise tax, I adjusted that down by about $4,000. Building permit fees, we kind of held the line with that because we've been collecting much more than, was anticipated in past financial years. And there is still, a lot of activity going on when it comes to, the code office and, building permits and contractors who are working. And, credit card interest, just a slight adjustment downward on that from 4,500 to 3,000. In terms of other major ones, Opera House rentals, we originally had budgeted 50,000. Now we're thinking 35,000 is more realistic. Again, it's just a best guess at this point in time. We're hoping at some point, things will open up and we'll be able to start renting the Opera House out again. It will probably be one of the last types of venues that, is open to the public. So, at this stage, it's anybody's best guess as to how much of the year that we're going to lose the opportunity to, rent out the Opera House and collect revenue from that. Harbor permits, we were thinking of adjusting that downward, but really, when it comes to moorings and, the inner harbor floats and the finger floats, a lot of those, people are on a wait list for a very long time to have spots on those areas, and they pretty consistently pay year after year. And we don't foresee that changing as a result of this. However, when it comes to harbor dockage, that's a different story. That's things like, transient boaters and other sorts of revenues that we receive. That's something that we think could take a substantial hit this year. So we wanted to, adjust that significantly downward from 85 to 50,000. Another kind of area where it's really just anyone's best guess, permits for the day sailors and the windjammers. This is really going to be, there's kind of two schools of thought on this. One is that, we're providing dockage, for these vessels. So you could make the argument that if they're using this space, they should pay for it, sort of regardless of what's happening to their businesses. But, on the other hand, you could make the argument that, these are small businesses that are on the harbor that we would, we might want to help in some way if they're struggling economically. And this is one small way that we could potentially help those businesses by, adjusting the fees or reducing what we collect. So I just kind of threw those numbers out there. That's definitely something that's for discussion. And again, we don't know what's going to happen with their seasons as well. We can come back and discuss any of these things. I'm just sort of going through them to hit on all of the major ones. For areas that we adjusted upward, interest earned on our checking, and that's been pretty consistently, collecting in the 90,000 range. So we adjusted upward to 70,000 from I believe I had 60 in there originally. Yes, I had 60 in there. Reserve withdrawals, this has increased because I think originally we didn't talk about using the harbor reserve to fund the replacement of the floats. So that increase from 65 to 90 takes that into account, as well as, not doing the bridge project. We took 20 out. So I think that, that's add in the 50, take out the 20, that's gotten us to the 95,000. And then the other major change would be the use of surplus. Originally, I proposed using 450,000, but in order to sort of, like I said before, get us in at as close to zero as possible, given all of these downward adjustments to revenues, if we want to, get ourselves to a place where the net impact on taxpayers is as close to zero as possible, we're going to have to use more surplus. We just received the audit report for FY19. We are in a position where we can use up to $700,000 worth of surplus and really not impact the town's sort of, for lack of a better term, rainy day fund negatively.
Mark Haskell, you had a question?
Yes, I noticed that there's a new line this year for the legal attorney fees of 147 plus. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but could you explain that out to us again, please?
Yes, so that is the city of Belfast reimbursing us for the attorney's salary and their portion of the attorney's salary and benefits.
Okay, and that comes in under just general revenue, correct?
It'll come into income from departments.
Okay, but it's not going to be piecemealed out that 3% of it goes to this and 10% of it goes to that. It comes in as one lump figure as revenue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Allison? Allison? Allison, you're muted.
Yep, sorry. Is there anything in here, it might not be a very big number, but to reflect that the wastewater department will be using time from the town attorney? And so theoretically, wastewater should be reimbursing, you know, if there are legal fees over there. Some of those legal fees might just be court fees and all of that, but some of them would be the use of Bill's time. I think there was a little bit of discussion about that at last time's budget committee. Would that be a revenue source for us?
Yes, it should be. That's a good point. So what we could do is just take the amount that's budgeted in the wastewater department for legal services and add it as a revenue line.
Or at least a portion of it. I don't know if some of that has to go to court fees or if they're filing fees that don't go directly to.
Yeah, there'll be a portion that has to be used for that purpose.
I had a question.
Yep, Lorna?
So I'm wondering, as far as the Opera House goes, how much money they brought in so far, or how that would work if the money they've made since January counts towards this amount number?
So it wouldn't count towards FY21, but it could be, you know, a good indicator for this financial year. So that'll, you know, collected this year for FY20, give us a good idea.
How far out are we booked to be closed, booked to be not booked at the Opera House at this point?
I believe Dave Morrison said that everything, they've canceled everything through June. Is that correct?
I can say I'm involved with one of the groups that's been one of the main music groups, and they were rebooked from April to June, and we just moved it from June to August. So he's in the process of keeping track of where the government is and moving them appropriately. So he's been doing a lot of rescheduling.
And I think he said most of what he had rescheduled rather than dropped, correct, Mark? Or
Correct.
Audra? Yeah.
Yes.
Audra, I would probably personally stay away from looking at reducing rates for the day sailors and windjammers, just from, I think it's hard because then all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of other businesses looking at them saying, well, how come you're not reducing my taxes? You know, that's our revenue from that business. I don't know if we're going to pick winners or losers in that.
I will say that I know Rockland has, and several other towns have been getting those requests already from similar harbor businesses just to reduce rent on floats and that kind of thing, but or whatever it's worth.
But then there's
Yes,
the
Judy?
hotels and restaurants in town. I mean, there's going to be so many people impacted that are going to want help. I agree that it tends to favor one.
Mark Haskell?
Yes, with the changing in revenues from all of our local citizens, we may have to reconsider charging our out-of-town citizens who come in and use our facilities for free.
Who are you thinking about specifically, Mark? What areas are you thinking this would be an issue?
I'm thinking about the farmers market and the rowing club and the softball leagues and all of these different groups that use our town facilities for free. I'm not against any of them. I think they're all wonderful. I just don't think the Camden taxpayers should be subsidizing out-of-town businesses.
Any other comments on the revenue lines that Audra just went over?
I just think they're very optimistic, given what I've been hearing on the news. I mean, we're an older population in this town. I mean, I've been thinking about like the things I'll miss, like SIF, or, I mean, it's just such a great unknown, but to put a lot of people in the Opera House, whenever my daughters come home and their comments like, oh my God, everybody's so old here. You know, I just see that. I think it's very, and what about the state? I was wondering, has the state actually given us any feedback on the past 2 months, what the impact of this has been on state revenues just since March or February?
Yes, they've updated revenue sharing projections.
So what are they saying it looks like just for the past couple of months? Has the hit been like 10% or they?
Well, it's hard to say because they do it, they don't really do it on a month by month basis. And it's really just projection. But this would be, when I was coming up with the revenue sharing adjustment, it was with the state's new numbers in mind.
So you were saying 250,000, right?
Yes. But you must keep in mind when we originally prepared the budget, it was looking to be more like 450,000.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you've already made that adjustment.
I didn't put that in there because I'm very skeptical of the state's numbers and I'd rather under budget than over budget. But that's kind of like originally the projection was about 450,000. So that's why I'm saying I think that 250 is a realistic readjustment.
Lorna?
Yeah, I feel like the Opera House may not even be able to open into the fall. It may not be able to have big events at all. The summer, rec stuff, the camp stuff, we don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I think there's a chance it won't happen at all. On the big events, especially type items, I think are likely to be very heavily impacted. So I think that should be kept in mind.
Mark Siegenthaler?
Yeah, I just came up with a thought here. I mean, if, say, at the end of the year or next year in evaluating, the state looks at every town's budget and how this virus has affected them. And they figure out a subsidy based on that. So if that's the case, and we currently reduce our revenues in the budget, it'll show, I mean, we're reducing our revenues in expecting the coronavirus to impact it. So I'm probably not making any sense here, but what I'm trying to say is if we if we correct those numbers now, then in the future, it's not going to show that we were negatively impacted because of this virus, which may affect us in future state aid.
I'm not really, I wouldn't want to suggest that we adjust these numbers necessarily, but more that we keep in mind to kind of create more of a contingency for possible things that happen. And I guess I'm really thinking more this year. I get a little confused by the 2021 thing.
Yeah.
But, I'm really thinking more this year and maybe even for the next 18 months.
Audra, do you want to comment on what Mark was just saying?
I mean, it's a good point. But again, it's a hard thing to predict. there is another stimulus package that's coming, and it's supposed to be for state and local governments. And there's a lot of talk that it might be for infrastructure projects, but it could be for other, it could be to, reimburse us for revenue that we're not collecting as a result of this. It's just so much uncertainty, and we just really don't know what so, I mean, we're all just doing the very best we can in a very uncertain situation.
Carla?
Yeah, and I'd like to address what Mark said. If it were me looking at the negative impact from this situation, I would look year over year actuals. I wouldn't really look at budget, because budget is just, it's just a what if situation. So if I was trying to prove my impact, I'd go with the year over year look of actuals.
For raised hands. Any other comments? What do you need from us on this, Audra?
Really, I just need you to approve a bottom line revenue number, but it's the same thing with like any other area. If you have suggested changes or areas where you'd like to look at something further, you absolutely can do that. I think we've talked a lot about the surplus, and there have been a lot of questions around that. So I think that everybody sort of keeping that in mind, and if they're comfortable using that level of surplus, it would be really great to have feedback from the budget committee on that as well.
Can I ask a question about the surplus? And
Go ahead.
can we allocate portion of that surplus to the contingency fund?
I guess the way that it would work is you could, it doesn't really work that way. Like we wouldn't necessarily move money from the, the contingency over to the surplus, or sorry, from the surplus
to the contingency.
Yeah, but what you could do is you could say, okay, we're comfortable with 150,000 used out of surplus, but we'd like an additional 100,000 be used out of surplus, with the understanding that that's going to offset another 100,000 in contingency. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I just don't know the mechanics, so it does help.
Yeah.
Audra, could you say that again? You broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So what I'm saying, and this is much like anybody who was on the budget committee last year, this was sort of done for the libraries, some of their capital projects. So you can't transfer money per se from the surplus to contingency, but you could say, for example, yep, we agree with 650,000 being drawn out of surplus, but we'd also like an additional 100,000 on top of that, with the understanding that it's going to offset an additional 100,000 in expense for the contingency account.
So I thought, my understanding was that we could use 700 of the surplus without impacting the rainy day fund.
Yeah.
And you had budgeted 450 so far. So the idea would be to take another 250 altogether, or put 550 in your surplus and then add 150 to be potentially used to contingency, correct? That's how it would work, to get to 700, and to give us enough flexibility to address any kind of contingency or emergencies. I get it.
But actually in the updated version, she already has it increased to 650 from 450. So we're getting pretty close to that $700,000
mark
already.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry too much about the 700,000 because the rainy day fund, it's very conservative. That's even a very conservative amount of cash on hand for us to have, if that makes sense. So even if you spend more than 700,000 out of our surplus, we still have ample funds to cover emergencies.
So for instance, there was a conversation earlier about adding 100,000 to the 40 for the contingency. You're saying an alternative would be to say, let's put another 100 into this line item and specify what it's for. That would then.
Yeah, with the knowledge that you're also going to put another 100,000 in on the expense side in the contingency. So that way you're not having an impact on taxpayers from adding $100,000 worth of expenses because you're offsetting it with $100,000 in revenue by using more surplus.
Okay, all right. Mark Haskell?
Yes, if I remember correctly, at the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday night, they discussed the audit from last year. And one of the questions that came up from the selectmen was talking with the accountant was how we stood with our rainy day fund and the number of days, months out that we needed to have. And we were, I'm not going to say we were largely over that amount, but we were over what the state requires or suggests as a minimum.
So we're $700,000 over our policy as a town for what we need to keep for cash on hand.
Okay, that's the number I was looking for. That's our town policy as far as what we keep on hand.
Yes.
But how far above are we the recommended, the state recommended amount that we have on hand?
The state doesn't have a recommendation around that. That's something that each individual town decides what
that was figured with the, did our auditors feel that was enough?
Our auditors felt that we could comfortably spend another 700,000 more and still have enough cash on hand to meet our own policy in terms of unassigned fund balance.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to make sure I heard. So thank you.
Allison?
Well, the auditor, I personally wasn't too impressed with the commentary from the auditor because it was very generic in terms of, well, this isn't the time that you would be giving money back, and it's always any town would like to be in the position that Camden's in, and he was kind of encouraging us not to let that unassigned fund balance drop at all. But at the same time, yes, he was acknowledging that it was above where it technically needs to be. The other thing that's been mentioned, that 16.9% number, which is the select board policy, different towns have different policies, but in addition to the unassigned fund balance, Camden is unique in that it does have pretty significant reserves, just specific reserve accounts that can be tapped into. So when towns set their policy for what the unassigned fund balance needs to be, many of those other towns haven't been saving for a harbor fund, a fire truck fund, a blah 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 fund. So I felt like the auditor was kind of telling us you'd be crazy to let that number drop any lower because you're in such a great position, but also the other side of it is the taxpayers. I feel we're in sort of too good of a position to justify. So
right, I mean, just to give you all some context, I've worked for other municipalities where they've only had 3% and they were thrilled when they got up to 6% in their unassigned fund balance. So I mean, we over a very long period of time, the town has been very well managed financially and very conservatively. So I think in a time where we're looking to help out taxpayers and reduce the burden as much as possible, we can comfortably use these funds and not be doing anything that's financially irresponsible.
Did I hear? I thought I heard somebody preparing to say something. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Mark Ratner.
One thing I'll say about all of this is all of auditor's history and all of our histories, unless there's somebody that's about 122 years old, is in somewhat normal times. This is an exceptional time. We don't know where it's going to go. I like having being prepared for the unknown. If the unknown doesn't happen, if it doesn't get as bad as it possibly could, good. If it does, then, you know, being as well prepared as we can is a really good thing. That's how I feel about it.
I agree.
Mark Siegenthaler.
So I think it might be time to make a motion
And what might that motion be?
to accept the town manager's revenue projections as presented at $1,110,000.
Mark, actually, the total would be
I'm sorry. $2,468,206.
$3,468,000.
Put on your glasses, Mark.
I don't want to shortchange you.
So that's $3,468,206.
I'll second that.
Correct. Got it.
And we have a second. So any more discussion on that?
And so is now a time where we can discuss this idea of putting more in the contingency fund?
It would be.
If
Bob?
I'm hearing this right, based on what we had and where we are today with the revised number, we really haven't increased revenues because you've only increased revenues by, reduced revenues by $1,000. Is that correct?
About two.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Or
can you hear me better?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to be clear because I don't have the updated sheet in front of me. I heard 3,468 round numbers.
Correct.
For the approved amount, the number I have on my sheet is 3,449. So it's $1,000 difference in revenue total.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
More like 20.
Revenue sharing got bumped up, so that's offsetting.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying we're delving into a conversation about. My point is we have not increased revenues, so there's nothing here to offset any contingency kind of a discussion. If that's the philosophy of trying to, add if you want to. This is the point where if you want to add $100,000 to contingency, you would have to add another $100,000 to surplus or something to increase the revenues to offset it. Correct?
Correct. Then that was not part of the motion.
Understood.
So there would have to be another motion to do that for the extra 100,000 if you wanted to do that in contingency.
Yeah, whatever you decide.
Yeah, I think we should do that, but I'm not sure the procedure exactly.
I'm sorry, say that again, Laura.
I think we should add revenues and take it from the reserve rather than increase taxes to do that. So then we can put it in the contingency.
So for procedure, you would need to make a motion to amend the motion in play.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to add 100,000 to the revenues from
surplus.
The surplus.
Yeah. Mark Haskell, you're muted. If you have something to say.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe you can make that motion because contingency is under expenses and we're talking about revenues. They're two separate categories. You can't have a motion that includes both categories at the same time.
I think she was moving towards that. She's sort of addressing the revenue side right now.
Right, but you can't motion them both at the same time. They can't be they shouldn't be included in the same motion because they're two different entities. contingency fund is coming out of.
Her motion was
budgeted
to increase surplus by 100,000 on the revenue side.
Isn't that right? Isn't that what Mark had addressed was the revenue
Lorna,
with
you
his
got it,
motion?
right?
Yes.
Got it right, yeah. I second your motion, Lorna. To increase the revenue side of 100,000. I second.
From the
Surplus.
surplus. Audra, what say you on that as far as procedure goes? Because what we're basically doing is asking to use that over on the contingency, which we have not yet voted on.
Yep, so Lorna did it correctly, and then the other side of it will be when you get back to voting on contingency, you'll add 100,000 here.
Yep.
So I'm confused. Lorna, are you saying you want to put more money back into the surplus line 904002?
I want to make the surplus another 100,000. So 750,000.
Okay, thank you.
So we then have the revenue.
So I do understand what Mark is saying, Audra. Does it make sense to hold this and go, we have had the discussion on revenue, go back to the contingency and then come back? The two are dependent on each other. So yes, either way.
Lorna did it correctly. She made a motion on the revenue side to increase by 100,000. So you'll all vote on that. And then you need to go back and vote on contingency anyway. So when you get there, somebody will need to make another motion to increase that by 100,000 as well.
Audra, what would that revised number be on the surplus? My book shows 450. Are we increasing to 550, or do you?
No, it'll be 750. Sorry, Bob. You're not looking at the one they got tonight. So the one they got tonight has 650,000 used, okay. And so Lorna's proposing to add another 100,000 to that, so it's 750. So the bottom line number that everybody will be voting on is 3,568,206.
Thank you.
So we need to have a vote on the amendment to the original motion, and then we will vote on that amended motion, assuming that the $100,000 passes, if I am correct in that procedure. And if I can find my list of everybody again. Hang on. My list has disappeared in the shuffling of papers.
Start from the back end, Robin. I'm still wrapping my brain around this.
I know. I'll just look at everybody's name on here.
Just read them off the top of your computer list of the people there.
Oh, I found it. It's underneath my Girl Scout cookies. Okay. So we have Lisa.
No, go from the other end first, please.
Go from the other end first? Oh, we can do that. How about, we'll start with you, Tyler. How about that? This is for the amendment. We're amending the original motion to add $100,000 from the surplus to the town manager's recommended amount here.
Yes.
Yes. That's Tyler. Beth Doan?
Yes.
Yes. Courtney?
Yes.
Of course, Sophie, sorry.
Yes.
Wendy Rich?
Yes.
Mary Winchell?
Yes.
Kristen Sidwell?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Yes. Sandy?
Yes.
Yep. Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Mark Haskell?
Yes.
Yes, I'm a yes. Lorna?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
Lisa Dresser?
Be a yes with reservations.
Okay, no.
Yes, call me a yes.
We'll call you a yes. Okay, so the motion has been amended from $3,468,206 to $3,568,206. is what we will vote on. If that was clear. So we'll start again, Tyler. Tyler?
Yes.
Yes. Beth Doan?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Okay. Sophie?
Yes.
Wendy, Rich?
Yes.
Mary Mitchell?
Yes.
Yes. Kristen Sidwell? Carla?
Yes.
Yes. Sandy? Cox?
Yes.
Yes. Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Mark Haskell?
Yes.
I am a yes. Lorna?
Yes.
Yes. Judy?
Yes.
And Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes for $100,000 over the town manager's recommended on this budget. So now we go back to contingency. And we had a motion on the table. The motion for that was for the 40,000, but there was a suggestion to amend that vote, that motion.
Yes.
So I'd like to make the motion to amend it to $140,000.
Okay, second?
Second.
I will second that.
Seconded. So the motion that we're going to vote on is for total contingency to be $140,000 for FY21.
What page was that on? I just wanted to mark in my 36? 39. Okay, thank you.
I have a question quickly. In the packet that Janice sent us, there was a contingency account page, page 8 and page 5, and they were different numbers on total general fund and assessment. There were two different pages. I was wondering which one we're referring to.
In what Janice sent out today, this is page 39.
Right, but in the PDF she sent, page 5 of the PDF was the contingency account, and so was page 8. And there are different numbers in the category of general fund expense. So it changes the total for general fund and assessment.
Sorry, I'm just going to bring that up, Carla, to make sure I got the right one.
Yeah, page 5 had a bottom line number of 10,251,287. Page 8 was 10,221,637.
I don't find either a page 5 or a page 8 listed in what was sent to me today.
Mark, they're not page numbers. It's the page in the PDF document that she emailed us. They're both page 39.
And they have a
Two
different
page
total.
39s that were sent to us. And they have different numbers on them.
Yeah.
How about to clear up any confusion, because Jody's been inputting the changes into the actual Excel document as we've been going through it. Would it be helpful if she read out the bottom line number that is the correct one? Because what I'm guessing is it's just two different versions with slightly different numbers on each of them, and that's going to account for the change. So Jody will have the from the actual Excel file what everybody's agreed to tonight.
Yeah, as long as we're all on the same page, doesn't matter to me how we do it.
Yep.
I do see where she's talking about, she's looking at the very bottom of the general fund expense Excel spreadsheet. And that was at 10,251,000. That's including the county tax and the Midco solid waste assessment. So above those two is the number that we're working on right now, is just the general fund budget. So for all, now, did you guys make a motion to increase the 100, the contingency?
Yeah.
Yes. That was the motion. So that's the motion we would be voting on now.
Okay, so the bottom line for the gross general fund expense right now is, which would include the $140,000 in contingency, is $9,543,087. That is minus 2% gross municipal budget for FY20. So it's 2% lower than this current year in gross expense.
Negative 2%, yes.
That's correct. In the gross expense.
Right. Where it was 1% previously.
Prior to all of your work tonight? I believe so.
Jody, I'm sorry, can you just repeat that? So the 9,543,087, that's town general fund expense? That's that number?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So we have to vote on this motion, right?
Yes, we do. Yep. Just making sure there's nothing else. Any other questions prior to voting? So the motion that we're voting on is for that contingency fund for 140,000, where the town manager had originally recommended 40,000. So there's an increase of $100,000 in that to go into contingency based on our prior vote for the surplus. Do a roll call vote again. Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, yes. Beth Doan?
Yes.
Courtney Suforth?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes.
Yep. Wendy?
Yes.
Mary Winchell?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Mark Haskell? Mark, you're muted. Mark Haskell, you're muted.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I am a yes. Lorna?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
And Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes for 140,000.
Robin, for just a point here.
Yeah.
If I'm muted, it's on your end because I'm on the telephone and I don't know how to mute the telephone.
Yeah, I don't know. You unmuted it. I don't know what you did, but you unmuted or somebody unmuted you. I could see you on the phone. Yeah.
I muted Mark because there was a lot of static coming from his line.
Oh, okay. Okay. So those are our agenda items. Audra, do you need more? What do you need from us on this? Or is there time for some conversation as Judy requested?
So that's all the real action items. And I think everything else, if you have any feedback or recommendations for the select board, I think it would be greatly appreciated.
I would bring up, if I can just say one other thing, was if we want to do something in passing this along with a motion to acknowledge, as I had passed that along earlier, I don't know if you need to see that again. If somebody wants to make a motion or edit that motion or not bother with it, but to make clear that we are passing this along with knowledge that things are very uncertain. And I personally think that it makes sense if it, when it comes time to town vote, what they're going to get is a recommended budget from the budget committee, and they'll get a recommended budget from the select board, which I anticipate will probably be lower than what we have just done, because they'll be going through it a lot between now and when it goes to town vote, and to just explain to the community who's voting on it why there is such a discrepancy in those two votes. I think there normally isn't, but to just say that we're doing this in a different point in time than they will be doing. But I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion like that, or
Robin,
Bob?
I just wanted to, Jody, did you summarize where the net of what all these changes are on the total budget for the town?
No, I have not. Would you like me to?
I think the budget committee should know what they're approving.
Okay, so your net, which obviously is your expenses minus your revenues that you voted on, brings the net general fund budget to a minus 8.4% over FY20. So you are below by about $50,000 from FY20.
So what is the number, Jody?
The number is $5,974,881.
Jody, can you update the summary sheet too, as a result, what you've got updated, and send that to everybody, please?
I will. Yep.
Thank you.
At this point in time, how does it affect our tax rate contingent on the county and the school budgets coming through?
Oh.
And micro solid waste.
I mean, I would say that there are just too many factors that go into calculating the mill rate that, this is just one of them. And we're only 30% of that overall equation. And then to add in on top of that, sort of the assessment side of it and increase value. I just think trying to project what the mill rate's going to be based on the very small input that this is into that overall calculation is just not very useful.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest sharing this motion that I put forward, and I'm not pushing it, but just to give us an idea of the suggestion. And if anybody has thoughts, you're welcome to not make a motion or to edit, but I would prefer that we send it forward with some kind of a qualification of what's happening.
Could I just ask a question, Robin? Do we actually vote on the final budget, or we don't, I guess, then? We've just voted section by section. Is that how it works?
Audra, we had this conversation last week, and I think what I heard was that we did not need to vote on the entire one, where we had voted for item by item.
I don't believe in the time that I've been here, you've ever voted on the bottom line figure. You vote department by department and on the revenue section.
Okay.
I guess my concern is that last week when we left it, I thought the last meeting we left it, we were going to have an opportunity to revisit, which I understand now it's late and we have to get this done, but I still have the same concerns I did then about some of the raising, some of the increases in salaries during this time.
And let's
I shouldn't have raised it at the time. I just thought that we were going to come back and have another opportunity to revisit that.
Well, Judy, I remember from last meeting that I think, Audra, you were going to take a look at a couple of what ifs of what the magnitude would be of holding wage increases or step and grade increases and show us the impact on the budget. Would you have a chance to do that?
Yeah, so we can tell you what it would be if we don't do a 3% COLA, and if we only do a, what was it that Richard said, was like a 1.5% COLA. So we can tell you what the difference would be for both of those.
Okay.
You want to hear what the numbers are? Jody can.
I have the 0% COLA, if that were to be applied. And there may be a little bit of a variance because I'm trying to update 3 different budgets as we go along. So it would be more, if I could have another half a day to get this straight. If we went with a 0% COLA, it would be about the net expenditure would be about minus 2% over FY20.
Can you put that in numbers?
Net general fund expense would be 5,907,681.
So that's without any, that's with no COLA. And then
That's
you were,
correct.
and then you were going to look, Audra, at 1.5 and then what the 3 is, correct?
Yes. Oh, it did, sorry, did, Jody, did you give them what the value of that is? Of the not having a COLA at all?
What do you mean by value?
How, like,
Thousands of dollars. Sometimes I like things just in real numbers instead of percentages, since I'm not looking at the same thing you are.
yeah, how many thousands of dollars is it?
Looks to me like it's about $4,000. Is that possible? That's different from what you just gave us for the total.
4,000. Well, the difference between a 3% and a 0% is about $76,000 in savings.
76?
Yeah, but I would need to add in or subtract out FICA, Medicare, and all that, which is a percentage of all the wages.
I mean, I would just throw in that, listening to the discussion from last week, I found that the argument of a 0% COLA to be incredibly compelling. And maybe I haven't heard the very best version of the staff argument in favor of it. I would not be in favor of readjusting the step or the grade increases for the wastewater treatment plant, because I do think we need to bump those people up to match the job that they're doing. But just the general increase in cost of living, that's something that I, at this point, would strongly advocate for when it comes to the select board, unless there's something I'm missing from the equation. And I think a lot of the points brought up were really right on.
But wait, what? I didn't hear the percent you said, Allison. What did you say?
To me, 0% COLA to me for just 1 year, given the situation, to me makes sense. It would be, maybe I haven't heard the best version in favor of having a 1 or a 2 or a 3% COLA, and so my opinion could change. But as of now, I don't know how I would explain to just the general public that at a time when nobody is getting raises, I mean, some people are. I know I have a friend who works at Camden National. I think there's going to be a cost of living increase, but for the most part, it just seems like since town employees are generally fairly well taken care of, I think, or if not, then maybe we need to do better. But I just can't justify. I don't know why we would have a cost of living increase this year. It seems like there should be a little bit of sacrifice involved. But
And that's my position, because I think there are people, I look at the restaurants that are closed and the people who work in the restaurants. And I mean, I just think everybody's so hard hit at this point.
I'll tell you what I think offhand. I just have a gut reaction to that of cutting that out, because in part I feel like it's balancing the budget on the backs of the employees. And, instead of saying that we're going to cut I haven't fully thought out how to articulate it, but in another way, we're not cutting back on public works or, on some service that the town, we, the taxpayers, we aren't cutting back on our own services. We're asking the employees to cut back on what they have. So I don't, to me, that's just a gut reaction.
Not cut back.
Lisa?
Yeah, I'm not looking at it as so much as balancing the budget on the backs of the employees. I mean, we're still being very generous with benefits packages and things like that, which is huge in this day and age. And I do agree that the step increases are important to keep everybody in line. But I agree at this point with Allison on this, that at this point for a COLA for 1 year, if they're still getting health insurance benefits and all of that, it's still a very fair package.
Mark Haskell?
Yeah, I kind of agree. An absolute cost of living raise at this point in time, when you look around the state, you're seeing municipalities laying off, in some cases, a third of their town employees. And if you were to give our town employees the option of being laid off or keeping last year's salary, I think you'd find that most of them would agree that last year's salary would be fine. I think this is the wrong time to be doing it. Unfortunately, I think there are people in all walks of government that are underpaid, and I think there are ones that are overpaid. But it's not the time to be giving out raises at this point in time.
Somebody over here. Lorna, did you?
Yeah, I guess I think it doesn't it doesn't seem sensitive to do a across the board raise because of so much hardship in the town. But I also feel like it's important that we value our town employees, and if they're underpaid or if they're not, their job descriptions are wrong, and that ought to be reflected in the budget and ought to be, they ought to get the money they earn, that they should earn. So I guess it depends. I kind of trust Audra to do what's right, recommend what's appropriate given the climate that we're in now. Because it just seems like, I mean, I don't know how our town's employees are paid compared to other towns. And it doesn't seem like we're in a position where we're going to have to do massive layoffs. At least I certainly hope not. So I don't know.
I mean, I guess I would say I would be very uncomfortable if the discussion were about freezing all salaries and not, getting, completely doing away with step and grade increases, because they're, that's based on a lot of longevity and a lot of different things. But I do think that, the COLA is one area where employees are flexible around and understanding that, this is a unique situation from those I've talked with anyway. So I think that, that's kind of an area where there's flexibility around that. I'll just leave.
Beth?
I would just, my first year in the budget committee, but I was also a town employee for 21 years. And I think that there's been amazing staff, and a lot of employees have been there for a long time. And I think there's some really hard stressful times ahead for all the different departments potentially going forward. And I realize we have to make hard decisions financially. Really like to acknowledge and the consistency of keeping the staff that we have, with all the uncertainty, having department after department who know the history of the town and we can count on them to do what needs to be done, so we can worry about all the other things that we're dealing with personally. I believe there's a lot of value in that, and recognizing that I think the different departments have they have a hard road long-term, all the fallout that potentially this could be. I'm having a hard time talking because it's late and I'm tired, but I just really want to acknowledge a lot of really hardworking employees that take care of us, and we can just count on them to do their job and we don't have to worry about it. And there's a lot of value in that, and I really appreciate it.
But
they do.
Yeah, Sophie?
But so I think I'm looking for clarity here. We're talking about potentially freezing the cost of living adjustment or keeping it at 0 this year, but maintaining the step and grade that would recognize the work they do and keep them on track with their career path. So COLA is not a raise. COLA is just a cost of living adjustment, right?
Mhm.
Mark Siegenthaler?
So I just did some calculations here, and to put things in perspective, with the stimulus checks that everybody will be receiving this year, $1,200 stimulus check represents a 3% increase in pay on a $40,000 salary. So if the $40,000 employee receives a stimulus check, it's the same as receiving their 3% COLA.
And stimulus checks are tax-free.
Are they?
I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Even better.
Yeah.
Better.
Way better.
Were there other suggestions? I mean, this is a time besides sending in a letter, a list of things for the select board to hear conversation. Were there other things besides the COLA and other areas where people thought that there could potentially be cuts or places that might be adjusted as the select board goes forward?
I would just really quick, before we end the budget committee meeting, I would really hope to get a little bit of input from, this seems to me one of the most critical issues that the select board is going to be facing on our special meeting that we're going to have on Saturday, is a decision about how to move forward with or not with town meeting and the election. We have, and I don't know if anybody has followed that, but whether or not we do it, there are some really compelling reasons to do it in June, like our charter says, and to try to do something a little bit innovative, and we're not, you might call it progressive, and try to get everybody almost universal absentee voting so that we can stay online with our fiscal year and hopefully involve a few more people in the process. It would mean putting everything that normally goes on the open town meeting warrant, where people go to the Opera House and they raise their hands and argue about stuff. It would mean putting that on the secret ballot and mailing it to every person in Camden and working really hard to get the word out about that. Or the other thing we could do is just kind of kick the can down the road and say, well, we hope things are different in July and we hope things can just all go back to normal and do it the same way. So I think because the budget committee is so involved in the budget, this would be a very different thing where the people would actually be voting up or down a budget and it would be sent to them rather than having to go to the Opera House. Hopefully it would also involve a lot more people that normally don't even ever come to vote on the budget, but it would be a pretty significant change that I certainly wouldn't want the whole budget committee to feel disenfranchised or to feel like you had the rug pulled out from under you because we did this in a way that is not typical. So if anybody has strong opinions, or either tonight or you just want to send them to us, I'd love to hear that.
How would that work, Judy? I'm sorry, I was looking at you, Judy. It looked like you were going to say something, but Audra, how would that work going forward to do something like that? Because there would still be a recommended budget from the select board and a recommended budget from the budget committee going out as a vote.
Yeah, so there's really only one version that voters can vote on, just like at open floor town meeting, but they would see both recommendations from the budget committee and the select board. But like with open floor town meeting, it's always the select board version that people are asked to vote on.
And just to be clear, what happens at the town meeting is there are also chances to amend numbers from there, and that would go away.
Yes.
That would not be part of the process. Mark Siegenthaler?
So with all that said, I mean, excuse me, would it be appropriate just to amend the entire budget to eliminate COLA across the board?
Audra?
I mean, you certainly can.
Yes.
Given that we're considering sending something out to all voters, and it would be that they could have the chance to vote up or down the select board version of the budget, but then they would also know what the budget committee's recommendation was on any given thing. And they would have, if they saw too many discrepancies or had concerns of their own, their option would be to vote down the entire budget. Given that that there isn't as much room for finagling at town meeting, it would be better this year to have, I would consider, if we do end up going forward with this, as much consistency as possible where between the select board and the budget committee. So where there is agreement, it would be nice if the documents that got given to people reflected that.
Well, I think in part they're not going to, because I think you guys are going to have more information and be going forward with different numbers. But I think there are going to be significant differences between the two budgets, Gar, between our recommendation and what's going on. I think that goes back to saying why I think we need to have, whether it's a disclaimer as we forward it, to explain why there are discrepancies in the two, and saying, you know, you guys have more information by the time you get to your budget than we did.
It's going to be Saturday. So in order to keep up with the schedule that would be proposed, we would have to, we're holding a special select board meeting this Saturday. And then the printing process and all of that would need to pretty much immediately begin, because there's still that 30-day window before where it would need to be available. So from my own perspective, having followed carefully the budget committee and Audra, I don't anticipate a huge amount of difference between what I would propose. I would recommend taking away the Mullino Bridge $200,000 or whatever that ended up being. That's like a small thing. Most of everything, and I would recommend the 0% COLA, but I don't think that there's going to be a huge difference in what the
Can you
select.
clarify what you just said? Is your meeting on Saturday to decide whether we're going forward with town budget, or that's your budget committee meeting? That's your meeting about the budget?
So yes, it's both things. It's we will be discussing the budget and approving it if we get to that point. It may be that the whole thing falls apart and that the five of us are, talk and we say, I heard this and I heard this, and we are unable to approve a budget, in which case that would kind of eliminate to a certain extent the option of doing this all mail voting system and trying to stay with the June town meeting date, which is, by the way, we have a memo from our town attorney. His recommendation is that we go with this method. So if our budget meeting goes well and we're able to approve the budget and the warrant, then that would be it. And it would also be the time that we would be approving the full warrant that would be sent to voters. So
is this a public meeting Saturday?
Oh, absolutely. It'll be on Zoom. But with the
Lisa?
same ability to participate.
Lisa Dresser?
So if we wanted to recommend a 0% increase in just the COLA on all of the wages for this coming year, would we have to go back and revisit each department individually, or can we do that as a blanket?
Audra, I'm assuming
I would recommend that you do it as a blanket.
Audra, wait, they've already in a motion on each department approving them by a vote. If they need to go back and want to change the COLA, they need to go back to every department and make that change.
I don't think so. I think they can make the motion and then Jody can fill in what the actual numbers are.
A point of order that is inappropriate.
well, we don't have an attorney here, so we can argue all day, but.
Mark Haskell?
I would like to say that if this committee would like to take a vote that under the current circumstances, we feel that an across the board zero COLA should be considered. I think it would go as a recommendation to the selectmen. They're going to discuss this all on Saturday. And rather than go back and go every one, if we were to take a vote and say, it is our, however we vote, yes or no, that we would like to suggest that it be just limited to a zero COLA at this point in time.
Make a motion.
Wait, hey, let's just have a couple more questions. Mark Siegenthaler?
So I think the way we could do that is with your proposed motion, Robin, if we just added the fact that we would recommend 0% COLA, and that may just solve it all.
May I say something?
Yep, Lorna?
I just wanted to remind everyone that the police department, it's not, that can't be 0%. That's part of their contract, right? So that can't be included as a, you know.
Right.
I also just want to put out my feeling is that all the departments that take care of the first responders, all the first responders really are under extreme duress right now with the coronavirus. And I don't know if, I don't know if the 3% is worth arguing about. I just feel like it's, they shouldn't have any reduction in their expected pay, because if any, they're under more stress and more danger than ever before.
Mark Ratner?
Audra, let me ask you a question. Tell me about, in these circumstances, the workload and the stress that our town employees are going through right now. How's this affecting them?
I would definitely say there are, there's some employees who are sort of more impacted than others. I would make the point that everybody still is working. There's really no need to furlough anyone because everyone can still work remotely. There are some people that you wouldn't even expect that are sort of the most impacted and kind of under the most amount of stress. Like our town clerk is a great example, just all the uncertainty around elections and the fact that she still has to prepare for, state and school and adjust to the changes that we need to make on a local level. I acknowledge people like that who you probably wouldn't expect to be impacted by what's going on, but are significantly impacted. And also, all of our firefighters, they're kind of in a situation where they, you heard about the challenges that they're having with, staffing at the call division. That on top of the fact that, I think 5 of our full-time people or 4, and then 1 very reliable 5th call division member all faced at the same time a scare that they'd been exposed to somebody who potentially could have had coronavirus, and that could have made a situation where we had really no full-time firefighters available because they were facing quarantine. That's been very daunting for some people. So, I could kind of go on and on, but I think you get the idea.
Robin?
Yes. Yeah, Bob?
Robin, yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, and this is good, that, what I would suggest, because of where we're at, you really got the budget in general terms approved, but from the budget committee. But that said, it would be good, I think, if you want to just take a poll of any item that the budget committee thinks we should consider strongly. That's where this should go, in my opinion. So we would at least know that, 100% of the budget committee thinks we should eliminate the COLA, fine. We're hearing it. We're all been here, you know, for most of us the whole time. We get it. Is there anything else besides that you want to put on that list? Because we have a lot of things to consider. This is not black and white. This is not gray. We're not going to adjudicate the select board decisions in a budget committee meeting. We all have our ideas. You know what? They're all gray because of uncertainty. But to that point, yeah, my opinion about the fire department and all of our employees are working. All of our employees are not all staying home all the time. They need to go to the office and do things. Does that weigh more strongly against the 3%? We'll negotiate and we'll discuss that. But more important, is there anything else the budget committee would like us to consider that because where we are today, that we haven't been able to plow into the budget yet? That's really where we need to go.
Sophie, you have a question or a thought? You're muted. Sophie, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
So I think we're confusing two things again. The COLA is kind of a normal course of business, cost of living adjustment. We all feel very, I mean, it's a good discussion, but I think it's misplaced. Whether we want to recognize the stress and the extraordinary work that our town employees and especially first responders are doing is great. And there might be, I'm asking, is there another way to recognize that in the budget? But I don't think we should use usual cost of business expenses to either recognize the work that the people do or give them a special benefit. I think it's a wrong way to look at it. So if there's another way to recognize our employees, maybe it's something the select board should consider later on, hazard pay stipend or anything totally different to make sure that we're not confusing first of all, step increase, second of all, COLA, and third of all, extraordinary circumstances. That would be my recommendation.
Are there other areas that somebody at one point had suggested going back and, well, not going back, but as another area of thought is some of the donations that we were giving and things that got increased or didn't get increased as we went along. That was one area. I mean, are there other areas of the budget as we went through that you thought, or on reflection, I think is what Bob's saying, is are there other places where we might suggest that they look for cuts?
I'd just like to say, I'd be happy to go through it all and come up with a list, but it's too late for me to do that right now.
Okay. Well, you have until Saturday. So I'm going to share this screen if I can. And screen 2, I think this is the one. Can you see that? Am I pointing to the right thing, the proposed motion?
Yes.
So if you want to take a second to read that and see if there's something that you want to change, if it's right, if it's wrong.
Is that the one you sent us in the email?
That is what I sent in the email. Yeah, that is the email.
So you're not adding anything about our recommended on the COLA?
I've done nothing to it. That's just what I sent. I'm asking if you have recommendations for edits or pitch it and start over again. It was just a place to start. Any thoughts?
But my thought, I think we should add the 0% COLA. I'm not saying that we don't recognize those people, and I think they do deserve the step increases. But COLA is a different issue. So I think it should be the 0% given, we know going forward it's going to be tough. I don't know, could we take a vote on that and say that, 3/4 of the budget committee or 2 members or?
I guess, Bob, or I'm not sure who the question is that something that you need in this motion, or is that we say that we are forwarding to you a list of suggested places that and recommendations?
Yeah, I'm trying to be fundamental because I agree with Lauren. I'm kind of buzzing too, but and have been for the last 10 days. because of all that's flying around us. But I think I'm interested in hearing, and I think the select board is, we understand the budget number you've gotten to date. Makes a lot of sense. But if you have recommendations, serious recommendations that the committee thinks we should, we've already heard the COLA. Is there anything else we need to hear that you want us to, be really focused on, or at least discuss? We can do that. But I don't know whether you put it into this motion or you want to, put together. If you want to get them tomorrow, get these ideas to Robin, and Robin can forward them to us before Saturday. That's fine. But I think that's where we're at.
Well, if we're going to give a proposed motion, we need to vote on it, right? If we're going to put this document together, we just can't piecemeal be sending items in to add to it, our wish list, if it's coming as an official document from the budget committee.
I think that what Bob had asked for originally was that we had forwarded in advance, which is what was in the meeting, was that people forward in advance any thoughts that they had as a list of suggestions outside of what we're doing. I think this is a formal budget piece. We have voted on these things and we're saying this is what we voted on. We're sending it over to you because we're acknowledging that the world is changing. And then they are asking, I believe, Bob, you're asking them for a list of saying, this is, as a budget committee, these are things we're, as individuals and as citizens of the town, this is what we're sending in. I don't know that it needs to be part of the motion.
I think I think the fact of the motion is highly debatable. I believe that you have voted department by department, piece by piece on a total budget. To go back and change it now really suggests, I'm exaggerating, I'll make a point, to start the process. I don't believe that's procedurally correct. I'm not going to dictate and tell you what to do, but I think that it would be the same weight as to me as if there were a recommendation. For example, point by if the budget committee majority would like us to, consider deleting the COLA, the recommendation, fine, item 1. Item 2, the same thing. Item 3, 4, 5, or 6. There could be a whole bunch of them, but that's where the process, in my opinion, is at right now.
I just have to say, I have seen multiple years being on the budget committee myself, where the question of the COLA was left until the very end. And then it was definitely possible to go back and adjust those department categories. To me, you can come up with all the suggestions in the world and everybody can individually email us and tell us things to consider. But what goes out to the public, the major document, is this number that you voted on. And so to say that they can't go back and just change things based on a COLA now, I don't know. I would at least like to see, there does appear to be something, was a motion on the table, or it'd be nice to have them vote on the things that they actually.
Okay, so what you're saying is the only thing the budget committee wants to consider changing is the COLA. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I'm just saying we know there's one thing there, so why don't we deal with that and see where everybody weighs in?
I'm asking the budget committee if they have other ideas. If the COLA is the only one, that's kind of a little simple situation. I thought there were other things they were going to recommend about deferring capital projects and stuff like that they discussed before. I'm listening to hear what the budget committee wants to do.
The only reason I bring it up is we said at the end of last time's meeting that the information would come back to us. So it was my understanding there would be an opportunity to debate it and possibly add either something here or change, or at least vote on changing that. I mean, it was left at the last meeting, so that's why I didn't email anybody about it. I thought that they were going to come forward with the new figures and we'd have an opportunity to at least include it here in the letter.
Lisa Dresser?
Yeah, personally, from my perspective, I feel throughout the entire budget that we have been very thorough and I feel quite conservative. So from my perspective personally, yes, the COLA is the only portion of this that I have an issue with. I don't have any other issues or areas or issues with any of it.
My question, if we were to do if we were to do a motion on the COLA and do that even, before we get to something like another motion saying and I think this is really just a statement to the community acknowledging what's going on in the world today. But So we've just said, okay, so if we were to say we want to eliminate COLA, we can't do it for the police department. There was just a conversation of whether we do it for the fire department. I guess we would have to really think about what you want that motion to be.
Well, can we just say as contracts allow?
Yeah.
So
And is the police department, is that COLA or is that step and grade and benefits? Is that?
It's union.
All of them.
I understand that it's the union, but
hang on, Mark.
Are they saying that they absolutely have to get their step and grade increases, or are they also saying that they absolutely have to have a 3% COLA?
All of it.
It's in their contract.
Okay.
Mark Haskell, and you're muted. Mark Haskell.
Wait, I have to unmute Mark.
You have to unmute him. Okay. Hang on, Mark.
Done.
Okay, now you're unmuted.
Okay, I think I'm going to two things. One, I think the proposed motion that you had, Robin, I like it. I think it's good. I think we should pass that as a separate entity, because that basically tells the selectmen that we do have major concerns about what's going on. And I think we could have a second motion that says we as a committee have a concern about the COLA increases. And just leave it at that. They've been listening to our meetings. They've been here. They've been listening to it. They've been listening to the problems from the beginning. I think we need to trust them at this point in time. They're going to have to make changes, and they're going to do it when it comes up. So I think it should be very simple right now. We pass the motion that Robin has that wants to propose, and then we pass a second motion that says that we as a committee have a concern about the COLA increase.
But
Period.
then,
Mark Siegenthaler. Hang on one second, Judy. Mark Siegenthaler.
So my thought is with your proposed motion here on the last sentence there,
yeah,
if we say we acknowledge that there may be drastic budgetary adjustments necessary, the largest issue would be COLA adjustments, period.
Make it two separate motions, because they're both recommendations.
Judy?
yes, but then I was just wondering, what goes to the voters? Do they see that we recommended the 3% then, and then there's a big discrepancy, like Allison was saying, between what we recommend? I mean, the voters are just going to see that we recommended this big amount, and right?
Just a point of order here. What we do on Saturday could conceivably not follow other recommendations of the committee. We have to work as a 5-member unit, and at least 3 of the 5 of us have to agree on any single suggestion. I can't speak for the entire board. If they decide that, I'm going to make a point by exaggeration, to not take that much for surplus because it's, it's not smart, we're not going to identify that to the voters either. So this is what normally happens in a meeting between the town manager's recommendation, the budget committee's recommendation, and the select board. We could be, on the other positive side, we could be hellishly lower than the budget committee in many areas, and less increase in total expenses. So that's you bring up a good point, but people will can ask questions on these items depending on how we go forward, which is still up in the air, as Allison mentioned. So I think right now we're just trying to get the budget committee to make one, approve a budget, and 2, because of the situation we're in, to make recommendations on what their position is. Maybe we can add it as a footnote somehow, but that for one item, I don't think it's worth it.
Also, it's not at all clear that the rest of the select board is convinced that there should be a 0 COLA. I'm really the only one that has said that. It may be that I want the opportunity to weigh in because it's helpful to me to hear.
But Carla?
I think if we're going to go through the effort of voting on the motion of the COLA, then our budget should reflect how we voted on it. Shouldn't be a footnote. All this documentation is going to be posted online with every line item on it for people to see, the public to see, and we need to be as clear as possible what we're recommending. And oh, by the way, addition to that, the notes across the board in this budget document are either, in many cases, they're outdated, or they're contradictory, or they don't give enough explanation. And in a year where we're proposing that a lot of people be able to look at this budget and scrutinize it at home instead of in the Opera House, I think that every department needs to go through and scrub those notes and make sure they're as complete as possible. So I think if we're going to vote, bottom line is we're going to vote on this COLA thing, it gets reflected in the budget that we give to the select board.
And we could vote to do that with the COLA, and the select board could elect to put it right back in. So
absolutely.
Sophie, you had a question first?
Robin, can you take people off the screen share? Can you take the screen share off so we can see all the people speaking?
Wait, hang on, let me get to it. Stop screen share. There you go.
Yeah, no,
Sophie?
Yeah, I agree. So I agree with Carla. I mean, there's no halfway point here. Either we take the COLA out across the board, and there's a motion that the select board, there has to be a motion, the select board has to vote on it. And the budget has to reflect our recommendation. I don't think we can. I don't think.
So does somebody want to make, Mark, or somebody want to make a recommendation?
Could we just make a straw poll, take a straw poll vote on where we stand on COLA?
Why?
Yeah.
Why not just vote?
Why?
Or just a
does somebody want to make a motion?
Are we allowed to do that though, or not? Yeah. I'm confused about that.
To go back in, correct me if I'm wrong, Audra, somebody who has to have been on the winning side has to make a motion to go back in and change it. But I think most of our votes have been pretty close to unanimous. So
that's true.
You wouldn't really have to go digging very far to get somebody that was on that winning side. And then it needs to be, I think, a 2/3 vote, is it, Audra, instead of a majority vote to pass, to change something.
Yes.
So if somebody would like to make a motion, you are welcome to make a motion.
Make a motion to go with the 0% COLA? Is that what you're talking about? Or make a motion regarding your letter?
Make a motion on the COLA if you want to do that.
I thought we couldn't. I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we change it to a 0% COLA. Maintain step increases.
And is there a second?
Second.
So that works, correct, Audra? And then you need a 2/3, you need 2/3 people, 2/3 vote to do that. And I guess my question is, to clarify that, are we, obviously we can't do police department. Is that 2/3? Somebody said earlier to do it as amended as, what was it, amended wherever possible, or
as contracts allow.
Yeah, as contracts allow. So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Audra, when is COLA calculated and how is it calculated?
So it would begin at the beginning of the financial year. And it's just calculated based on, 3%, what their current, or their salary was for FY20. So 3% increase over FY20.
But it's not always 3%. So
Yeah, that's my question. Is it actually based, it should be based upon the economy. Yeah.
Well, okay, so the reason why it was 3% is typically the police union contract kind of sets what happens across the organization. Sometimes it doesn't, but for this year we proposed that it did.
Is the police union one tied to the CPI, or is that just, it's written in there that no matter what, COLA is always 3%?
negotiated, so we do like every 3 years, we negotiate a contract with the police union, and that sets the COLA for the next 3 years. And this is year 2 of a 3-year contract. Am I correct, Randy? I just want to make sure that I'm 100% accurate.
Randy, you're muted if you're answering.
I think what a lot of this board's looking at is, I think, from my standpoint, I think it would just be nice if COLA reflected what the actual cost of living increase was.
Audra, July 1st, we'll go into the last year of that contract.
Oh, sorry, oh, wow.
I'm looking at the contract and it goes through FY '22.
Right, so this is the second year of a 3-year contract.
Our current year is.
FY '21 will be the second year of a 3-year. Yeah.
Jody, are you looking at the pay scale? I'm negotiating in Rockport starting July. Contract in Rockport expires this year. Contract in next year, July 1st.
Aren't they?
Randy, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
We're gonna have to negotiate next year.
I have your contract going through June 30, 2022.
Yeah, I think that might be a date issue.
Because I think you, Rockport, Camden stagger.
Yeah, Rockport's different because they're a different union.
Right, they're staggered because we're negotiating their contract coming up, and Camden's expires 1 year later. So I think we need to negotiate starting next March, and it'll take effect in July 2022.
That's correct. Yes. So this current contract goes through June 30, 2022.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll be in the last year of this after July 1st.
Robin, I have a question.
Yes, sorry, Wendy.
What's the history on COLA? Do you give it every year? This is my first time on the budget committee. Is it common? Is it expected?
I think it depends. So last year there was a COLA. The year before that there wasn't.
And what was the reasoning behind no COLA the year before?
There was a lot of discussion about benefits, and the employees. There's always a lot of angst when you talk about cutting people's benefits, and the employees were generally of the consensus that they would much rather just go into the budget year with 0 COLA than even entertain the motion of benefits being cut in any way or changed.
I can also add to that. That was also the year, I believe, when we were dealing with the fallout from the snowball huge deficit. And so that had a lot to do with the discussions about the financial situation.
I've always seen at the end. I was on the budget committee for 3 years before the select board, and it was always and I had friends that were on it before that, and it's always a big topic of conversation and a big debate, and sometimes it's more or less, and sometimes it's nothing.
So Audra, is that a motion that you can work with going forward? Audra and Joe.
I guess, yeah, it would be, I think for the sake of it's late, I think everybody's clear that if you vote 0% COLA, that the task is for Jody and I to go back in to the, department by department and make the changes. So if that's the consensus on voting, and that's what everybody understands, that's the task that Jody and I will undertake if the vote is yes.
Robin, I just want to clarify one other thing about the no COLA a few years ago. It was also a year when the insurances went up considerably. And so that was the choice people made. Since then, Audra's renegotiated a number of contracts, and our insurance raises have been nothing like they were. They've actually been very reasonable.
I'm changing, I'm just making a change to this other motion to make sure it makes sense. Let me, hang on one second. I'm just going to go to screen share for a second here. So what I've said, because what we have done is we have, if Jody, if this is correct, I think what we had passed so far to date was not $5,974,881 is what I think you said the number was.
Yes, that's correct.
And then if we pass this motion that's now on the table to reduce COLA to 0%, what I think the way to handle it is to stay in here because we don't have what that total number is right now, because they've got to go back in and recalculate it. So it would be that we're recommending a 2021 budget of $5,974,881 with the additional adjustment to reduce the COLA to 0%. Does that make sense? Because we can't give, if we do this, we can't give what that final number is until they have made that adjustment, unless Jody can do that.
I'm pretty confident I can give you a number.
Okay.
Robin,
So
while you're amending this, can we stick in there that it's an exceptional consideration given the circumstances?
I'm sorry.
That's in there.
It's in there.
So there's a noise coming from somewhere that's overpowering.
I will not be overpowered.
I don't know if I can be heard or not at the moment, but Chris Farley's name keeps flashing up on my screen like he's trying to get in and speak.
Chris, are you there? Can you mute yourself, Chris? I don't know if that's where the additional noise is coming from.
Better.
Thank you. Okay, Sophie, say that again.
I was, since you're making edits to your motion,
yeah,
could we add that? Could we qualify the additional adjustment to reduce the COLA to 0%, given the exceptional situation?
Yeah, let's see if Jody's going to come up with a number.
Right. Do you know what I mean? Because I wouldn't want town people to think that, you know, it's a measure against them.
Right. Well, I was putting that in on the assumption that Jody couldn't come up with a number for us to put into this.
I can give that number to you now if you'd like.
Okay.
The net general fund budget would be $5,898,881.
Okay, so that's if we then vote on this motion to eliminate the COLA. This would be the proposed budget.
Jody,
Okay,
does that flow through the benefits that are associated with that 3%? Aren't benefits,
The benefits that would be tied to the reduction with the 0% COLA would just be FICA, Medicare, and Maine State Retirement and ICMA.
Right. So did those flow through in your calculation?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna unshare this. Stop share. Okay, so now we're back. So what we want to do first, there's a motion on the table to reduce COLA to 0%. And so we need to do a roll call on that. So two more to go. Lisa?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
Lorna? Lorna, are you still there? Oh, you're muted, Lorna.
Yeah,
She's
sorry
nodding
about
her
that.
head yes. Yes.
Yes.
I will be a yes as well. Mark Haskell? Mark, I can't see you. Yes, I can see a yes happening there. Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
I'm looking for you. Kristen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mary?
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Courtney,
Yes.
Beth,
No.
no, and Tyler.
Yes.
Okay. So that is that. So we have gone back in and changed. We've had the 2/3 vote, so more than 2/3. So that changes that piece of our budget deliberations. So that remains, if you want to make this other motion to go forward with this, just as a clarification for when it comes time for town meeting or whatever the vote is, that we are clarifying that we did this in a particular moment in time.
I move we accept Robin's
Excuse
verbiage.
me?
I move we accept Robin's verbiage to go with the.
Second.
Second, okay. Any other conversation? Okay, one more time here. Lisa,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
Lorna,
Yes.
okay. I'll say yes. Mark Haskell? Yes, thumbs up. Mark Siegenthaler?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
And Tyler?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So that's it. I really highly suggest everybody go back and do as Bob has requested. If you have other thoughts of places where you think things can be reduced, that you do it, pay attention to the meeting. Bob, or Audrey, is there a place for public comment on Saturday and when you have your meeting?
Yes, absolutely. So just like we recommend with any select board meeting or any public meeting, you can provide comment by emailing them to the Town of Camden. So it's TOC Select Board at camdenmaine.gov. You can write to any one of the individual select board members. You can write an email to myself, and you can watch the meeting and post comments on the YouTube channel as well.
Can I ask you for,
where do we find the link to the meeting? Where
Yeah.
is it on the website?
So it'll be on the YouTube link is right at the very top of the website. It's the first link that you can click on to get to our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Audrey, can I ask you for one legal clarification? When Allison was talking earlier about the potential that in reality, the whole budget could get voted down, everybody could say no. What would happen in that case? I know in New Hampshire, it reverts to the current year's budget, but I don't know what the law is in Maine.
Well, I guess under the emergency legislation, we'd do the same. Yeah, we would revert to the current year's budget, but we would have to do what, school districts do and other places do when their budget is voted down, which is go back to voters again. And I guess it would depend on, what's going on at the time as to how we do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has not been an easy one, I know. And it's been hard going to Zoom. It's been hard changing what we were doing midstream like that too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank
you,
you.
Robin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, my goodness. How do I get out?
Audra's gone.
I'm still. Oh, she's there.
Oh, you are. I was just going to say, I'll just email you this from what
Yeah.
I just took. Okay. All right.
You did a great job, Robin. Thank you.
Yes.
For that.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
Good
Thanks.
job, Robin.
Tough
We
one.
got through it anyway.
Thank you.
You
I
did.
thought it was a really great budget committee.
Oh, good. Yeah.
This was, I don't know, I thought this was really valuable. One of the best budget committees I've seen.
Oh, good.
So, but that's just my opinion. I don't know.
Good.
But-
Well, thank you. See you all around. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too, Audra.